I value your life more than finding that weapon. Why are you so certain no one is coming?
We're just clones, sir. We're meant to be expendable.
Not to me.
What's up, MetaNerds? To understand the complete life of Plo Koon, we need to put all the canon and legends material from books, comics, games, shows, and movies all into chronological order. Seeing his family home, even how some of his family came to the temple, understand how his species-unique skills of telepathy helped him grow before and during the Clone Wars, becoming a father figure to many in the Order, a stoic source of calm power that was respected by his peers in the temple, and down into the lower levels of Coruscant, maintaining many underworld connections, rising up to the High Council, and forced to challenge his own beliefs during the final years of the Republic, fearing that he and the Order had lost their way in this war, struggling with the timeless threat to Jedi for millennia, the temptation of using the dark side to fight evil. His story begins at grid coordinates J8, in the expansion region of the galaxy, on the helium-rich world of Doran. All Kel Dor have a natural ability of telepathy, with these tubes containing the organs specialized in telepathic communication, which means just like how some animals can use the Force for hunting or evasion, the Kel Dor had a greater connection to the Force, at least in terms of telepathic ability, just from their biology alone. And this would be developed further in their native order of Force users, called the Baran Do. Members were called sages, who would step away from the community to live a life of asceticism, constantly meditating on the Force to grow their connection, allowing them to see glimpses into the future, everything from an individual's fate to environmental disasters. The sages would come down from their temples to warn the common people, while in the cities they would pick up on the gifts and children and test their ability to join the Baran Do. But the most obvious sign of this ability was that Force-sensitive children were born with silver eyes. And while this ancient tradition would fade away during the Old Republic era, as the Jedi Order spread and collected infants, elite families on Doran still respected the Baran Do sages. Many of Plo Koon's family members were strong in the Force. His own uncle had joined the Jedi Order, and as soon as they saw the silver iris in their baby boy, they knew he would be off to train on faraway Coruscant. Like all Jedi younglings, as soon as he arrived in the Jedi Temple, he'd be sorted into one of many clans, groups of usually 10 initiates that would live and study together for the next decade, having an instructor assigned to each clan, which was the first form of the relationship of a Jedi to their master. This instructor would teach them the basics on everything from the mystical to the mundane, communing with the Creator for 1 hour, and then cleaning toilets the next. And as the years passed, he was happy to see that his own niece, Sha Koon, had been accepted into the Order as well, though they were careful to make sure that they did not see their familial bond as stronger than what they had for everyone else in the temple, honoring the practice of forbidding attachments. For as long as he could remember, Plo wondered what his relationship would be like with his future master. Which of the elders would choose him? Would they be strict or playful? Would they travel the stars fighting crime, or stalk the halls of the library studying esoterica? When that day finally came, it was the hairy hand of a Wookiee that reached out to him. Master Tyvaka was an imposing 7 foot 7 inches tall, with a uniquely rich ability of precognition, something the old Baran Do masters would have surely respected. The Wookiee was focused, but short-tempered, quick to share his opinions and theories, and disdained the Order's focus on minimizing one's ego. He saw this faux humility as its own brand of annoying pride, and couldn't stand how reserved and proper his new young Padawan was. As we learned with Kenobi, the Jedi High Council would pair master and apprentice in a way that leveled both of their traits, letting each see the flaws and themselves in the other, and that certainly seems to be the case here. Most non-human species had their own form of a Jedi braid, taking the form of everything from bracelets, chains, beads, tattoos, and even medallions that were implanted, and it's unknown which method he chose, but I think it would be close to the beads, like something that Togruta were fond of. His earliest missions were still shrouded in mystery, but once Plo went from knight to master, his own master rose to sit on the High Council. Clear proof that this pairing worked to make the Wookiee more agreeable, but without losing that honest edge. Plo would focus on his path towards the Jedi Guardian, one who focused on their skills in combat, but also felt that the Force was calling him home to study the unique tradition of the Baran Do. After some time, he would gain his own place in this native order, which would prove invaluable in this age of growing tensions across the galaxy, which, unknown to them, were via the machinations of the hidden Sith Lords Plagueis and Sidious. The Stark Hyperspace War was the peak of a growing number of conflicts in the Mid and Outer Rim, bubbling up for hundreds of years. The Stark Commercial Combine was using their forces to close off hyperlanes, cutting off the Republic's supplies to countless items, but specifically targeting Bacta, buying up and pirating every bit of Bacta they could find, leading to the Jedi stepping in as peacemakers in 44 BBY. Master Tyvaka would lead the Jedi's efforts and act as mediator between the Senate and Federation, but before he left, he met with his old Padawan to discuss an opening on the High Council, and that he wanted to recommend Plo for a promotion. Characteristically, the humble Kel Dor denied, even when told not to worry that it wasn't a permanent seat, but Plo insisted that Qui-Gon Jinn was a much better fit. Tuvok insisted that Jinn was too stubborn and rogue, and he even believed that Jinn was a grey Jedi. He told Plo that he was being excessively humble again, acknowledging how frustrating this trait was and how it helped him to control his temper. When his old master moved on to ask if he would be his aide in these peace negotiations, Plo pushed for Qui-Gon to join them. Jinn would bring along his new Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it wasn't long into the meeting before blasters were pulled and Stark accused the Republic of springing a trap, as Ranulph Tarkin's security forces popped out of hyperspace, claiming to fight for the Republic and looking to end this war by capturing and killing all of the enemy leadership. Plo watched as his Wookiee master calmly maintained order and told the other Jedi that Stark had planned this. He must have known Tarkin's fleet was coming and wanted to use this as an excuse to capture or kill them. In an instant, the Wookiee's strength shot the table into the air, while sabers were ignited just in time to block blaster shots and send them back into their attackers. Plo's orange saber was slashing away. Jinn and Kenobi moved to protect Representative Newt Gunray, and Jinn yells to the Nymordian to get his droid bodyguards online to help with the fight. The HKB-3s hear the Nymordian's command to kill them all and open fire indiscriminately. The nearly 8-foot Wookiee at the center of the room was hard to miss. He was hit at least 3 times, while other Jedi were struck too. Jinn slices through them all in the next instant, but the damage was already done. Plo rushed to his old master's side, hearing labored breathing as Newt was just complaining about his lost products. Plo tells the others that it looks bad, but Tuvok was just focused on the mission, not even acknowledging his injuries, and using his force powers and intuition to warn them all what Stark was planning next. The Jedi realized they must join forces with Tarkin's surprise fleet to make it out of here. Plo and Valorum helped the Wookiee to his feet, and they were able to make it onto their consular-class cruiser. As they race away from the port of Troikan, Plo is at Tuvok's side as the small amount of Bacta available were applied to the wounds. He wishes he could get his master into a full Bacta chamber, but this was a luxury from before the times of these Bacta shortages caused by Stark's raid and the greedy hoarding of the Trade Federation. He could sense the life force in his master draining as the Wookiee explained the roles the other Jedi must take, before saying that he had 2 charges for his old Padawan. One, that he must rally the Republic troops, that if they fall, the Senate will fall, assuring him that he will see his path become clear as he took up his role with the troops. And his last order from master to apprentice was that when his council seat was open, Plo interrupts, saying that it was his wishes that Tuvok live. But his master's final lesson was to have him repeat the 4th precept. As Plo stated, there is no death, only the Force. He felt his powerful master fade away. Holding his Padawan's hand, his last words were, "You make me proud, Plo Koon." A moment later, young Obi-Wan burst in saying they needed Plo's help. The stoic Kel Dor rose up and confirmed the boy's suspicions that the Wookiee was gone, and when he joined the other masters, he could tell that they had sensed his passing. No words were spoken, and he, Adi Gallia, and Qui-Gon entered into a joint meditation to reach into the mind of the pursuing pilot. Right before he could fire, the pilots hallucinated a squadron of Republic ships descending on them, causing the enemy to eject. Obi-Wan was amazed, and Jinn explains that this was because of Plo's unique powers and telepathy. When the Jedi arrived at the rendezvous, they saw that Tarkin's forces had been shot down, and the landing zone was in chaos. The damage to their own ship had them running for cover as power systems failures were setting off chain reactions. It eventually turned the consular class into a brilliant ball of flames. When Gallia saw Plo staring off into the wreckage, she told him to think of this as his old master's funeral pyre. When he said his final goodbyes to Tuvok, he came upon a group of big, bickering egos. Ranulph Tarkin, Newt Gunray, and Valorum were all blaming each other for the chaos. But the deep, calm voice of Plo cut through the shouting and got them to focus on moving into the caves. Under the protection of hundreds of feet of solid stone, the mountains protected them from orbital bombardment, but they were surrounded, and even Tarkin was talking of surrender. He doubted that the Kel Dor could know that Stark was losing grip of his collective, but Plo explained that they were planning a full frontal assault to finish the fight, and that he could not simply Jedi mind trick a surrender. Even if he did, the enemy lieutenant would just kill Stark and take over. When the blaster started firing, the Republic forces did have a tactical advantage, striking from the cave entrances above, but the waves of united pirate warriors would keep the Jedi scrambling to new positions, and the troops would never forget Plo's leadership, how he could sense the next attack, and had the power to rally the troops like nobody else. In between fighting, Plo made sure to visit troops and provide moral support, and apply force healing where he could. Many troops would think back to these moments and were eager to thank the Jedi after the war for all he did for them, making them feel like people, not tools for a war machine. They felt true compassion from him and rethought the rhetoric of Tarkin's strict, human-only policy within his military. As the hours went by, it was clear that the attacks had turned into a siege, and Tarkin again was pushing for surrender. Plo knew they wouldn't last long, and he was right that the Republic Senate had to be rallied to come rescue them, and that Valorum must make it to Coruscant. If they could take a Stark ship, a small group might be able to escape. When Plo asks Tarkin if he would like to be a part of the evacuated few, the Seswana legend was livid and claims the Jedi was just trying to publicly humiliate him. Plo was unprovoked, but the pleas of a wounded soldier asking him to stay and keep the morale high did change his plan. Jyn offers to provide the escort without Igalia, and Plo would remain as commander of these forces. In the spaceport, Jyn and Kenobi were able to get Galia and the VIPs into a suitable ship, and meet up with Master Thulm and his Padawan Quinlan Vos. Back in the cave, the new additions are told of Tyvaka's reunion with the Force, and the young Quinlan Vos couldn't stand the niceties, saying why couldn't they just say he was dead. Obi-Wan is quick to repeat the Jedi mantra, but the youth storms off, while Thulm apologizes to Plo Koon. The ever level-headed commander says that every Jedi has problems with one or more of the tenets, that over time, the boy will see the truth. One of the troops approached them to say that a local named Billy Bongo wanted to warn them, but that most of his people hate the Republic and Stark pirates, but he always wanted to be a Jedi, so hoped to get an in by warning them of the flesh-eating bugs that infested these old abandoned mines, creatures that were currently swarming the young Obi and Vos. As the terrified youth run into the Masters, Plo calmly takes lead, and they all collapse the tunnel. Qui-Gon explains it was Plo that could sense their distress, and while Quinlan was apologizing for his previous outbursts, Plo leads the group back to the front lines, which had now moved deeper into the cave systems as the Republic was losing ground. When this wave falls back, he attends to the troops, and shares something he picked up in the Force, that the Senate had decided not to send any reinforcements. Tarkin snapped into a rage and screams at Plo that the only move they have is to surrender. Staring right through the rapidly reddening human face, the Jedi was seeing several timelines play out in his mind, and Jyn could tell that he was confident in something. On Coruscant, his niece, Sha Kun, was rushed into the High Council chambers, explaining that through their family's intense power in the Force, these telepathic Kel Dor could communicate even over this incredible distance across the galaxy. This ability was so surprising that Windu had to check with Master Tin, whose people also had an aptitude for telepathy. Tin explains that this is possible due to their strong personal connection on top of that, and because he may be working in conjunction with other Jedi. So the Council decides that they will do the same. Moving the youngling to the center of this hallowed chamber, the Masters all work to unify their focus in the Force. Back on Troikan, Plo is hearing them loud and clear, and says he wants to speak with Oppo Rancisis. Without hearing the plan discussed in the Thespesian's mind, simply hearing Oppo call it unorthodox, and that it could work if they found transport there, Windu brings up the problem of the hyperdrive virus, but is assured that Qui-Gon had a patch that could be broadcast to them, and Windu had to swallow his pride, and nearly beg the Trade Federation to lend them a small armada, knowing the Republic was set on just letting this far-off problem resolve itself. When the Neimoidian says this is impossible, Mace says that he will accuse the TF of working with Stark to manufacture the Bacta Crisis. And with this, Plo had his ships. Moments later, the Trade Federation transports were being filled with Jedi starfighters, and this unlikely armada was launched. To get the patch to broadcast, Qui-Gon and Obi would take a small craft and sneak into the Stark flagship. While they evaded the thugs, Stark was desperately trying to hold his shaky collective together, and when he sees the Jedi, he fires on his own men, explaining that a voice in his head had introduced itself as Plo Koon, a Jedi that was able to offer him amnesty if he brought this war to an end, convincing Stark that just as he was in his mind now, the Jedi knew his every move and secret, and asked how well did he trust the others not to take this same plea deal. And so through sheer power of the mind and Force connection, Plo was able to break the leader of a movement that had deprived the galaxy of Bacta. As soon as the hyperdrive hack was removed, A6 interceptors were streaming out of the Captor-class cruisers, and the enemy craft were quickly overwhelmed. Plo gave the order to the planetside forces to initiate the second stage of his attack. The Republic forces fled through the caves, coming out on the opposite side of the mountain, baiting the enemy into chasing after them. With the press of a button, explosives collapsed all the exits to the cave system, trapping the entire enemy force. Plo's plan was equal parts compassion and military genius. Throughout all this chaos, he had kept Stark himself and most of his army captured alive. But Ranulph Tarkin was disgusted by this reality. He had taken the explosives meant for one of the cave exits and placed them at the rubble holding back the ravenous bugs. As Plo pleaded with him that this didn't have to happen, Tarkin yells back through the comms and Jedi presence in his mind that he will not have his glory stolen from him. Plo may have stolen his command, but Tarkin would destroy the Stark Collective. A frenzied grin on his face, the human blew himself up, his last thoughts bringing him peace, knowing that the Shalot Eaters would devour the enemy. And in another shining example of quick thinking and practical mercy, he calls deep on the Force to boost his speed and power, ripping down rocks and stalactites to block this final path, the one Tarkin would have left open, saving his forces by keeping the bugs inside, but also sealing this Stark soldier's tomb. When the smoke cleared and all the masters gathered to debrief, they shared that Stark had taken his pardon and joined the Commerce Guild. Newt Gunray bragged that his security forces saved the Republic, and Valorum became Chancellor. But one of his powerful political allies, the Tarkin family, made the Chancellor name Ranulph as the Hero of Troikan, while Plo Koon would honor his master's dying wish and join the High Council. The missions of the next 11 years would see Plo rise to be one of the most important members of the Jedi Order. By 33 BBY, he would witness his first Yinkori massacre. The planet Mavich 7 was attacked by these obscure lizard people, a species that around this same time, Darth Plagueis would be talking with the Kaminoan cloners about the possibility of using these violent people with a natural immunity to force attacks as a template for a secret clone army. These people had recently joined the Republic, and were using the jump in access to shared technology to bully their neighbor worlds. This same arc had happened to many species during the Old Republic era, when they had no native space travel or hyperdrive tech. Windu goes on to reveal that the mutilated bodies of a master and Padawan were delivered to the Chancellor's quarters, and that the Yinkor were openly stating to the Republic contacts that their culture believes might makes right, and therefore protection of their culture was enshrined by Republic ideals. And Yaddle explains that the slain Jedi were likely unaware of the Yinkori being immune to Force manipulations. Throw in intel that they had their hands on Cortosis shields, which like Beskar was one of the few materials in the entire galaxy to be lightsaber resistant, and all in the High Council could sense that there was some greater force behind this. 3 strike teams were assembled, each assigned to a Consular-class cruiser, and sent to the 3 inhabited planets in the Yinkori system. Plo's team would include the whipped Kruk and 2 humans, Micah and Lilith. As soon as their cruisers emerged, they were immediately fired on by squadrons of fighters. This is long before the Charger C-70. This was a diplomatic vessel with no weaponry, but Adigalia's expert piloting resulted in one of the fighters taking out 2 of his allies. Plo was trying to outmaneuver them, but the shields were overwhelmed. Micah thought to release the escape pods to make it seem like they had bailed, and when still being pursued, they also dropped the Salon pod, the command center that would really sell that the crew was evacuating. By letting the cruiser drift down through the atmosphere, they crash land onto an enormous floating gas mining city. The Yinkori brutes quickly swarm their position, and Plo uses the gas to their advantage. He has the Jedi use the Force to sense their surroundings to safely sneak away, while the Force-insensitive lizards stumble blindly and fall to their death. But as the gas cloud was getting to be a bit too much for them, even Adigalia's forces complain about it when they meet up, and Micah is ragging on Koon's plan, getting even for Plo poking at how the escape pod plan barely worked. And Kruk wonders why the 2 Jedi were bullying each other, but the human explains that they had been through so many dangerous missions at this point that they show confidence in each other by making fun of their ideas. Both a friendly competition and living out the teaching that to worry is to lose faith in the Force. Meanwhile on Coruscant, the Yinkori were showing just how brazen they were, attempting to raid the Jedi Temple itself. Something only dreamt up in the minds of the maddest Sith. Although the attackers were quickly and completely destroyed, the blood of 3 Jedi was shed inside of these temple walls, something not seen since the Sith Wars of the Old Republic. This sharp increase in violence over the past decade was due to the Sith. Though they did not realize that yet, this attack on the temple confirmed that someone was using this hyper-violent species as a tool. The Jedi strike team had made it up to the dome on the gas mining complex, only for the wingsuit warriors to surround them. But Plo realized they stopped firing out of a fear of setting this whole city ablaze. This forced the lizards to drop down and fight them with their battle axes. Though the Force wielders were slicing through groups, their sheer numbers were wearing Plo down. Micah saw Adigalia's ship approaching and makes another carefree quip, while Koon was uncharacteristically concerned. As soon as the shadow of the cruiser covers them, the Kel Dor shouted, "No sooner is deliverance asked for than it arrives." And with a second wind, he rallies his strike team to make one last push to the Yinkori. hitching a ride on a balloon and gets pulled in through the docking tube. The mad lad Micah made Plo smirk behind that mask, as he displayed true trust in the Force when a gust pushed the balloon away, only for the human to let go and fall right into the ship. Gallia reveals that they had captured a Devaronian acting as a commander for the Inkori. They learn that Windu's team was about to be overwhelmed, and they all make their way to the loading ramp to drop into the fray. This is a well-funded military force, with advanced tanks and thousands of well-kitted fighters willing to fight to the death, while the squad led by Eth Koth makes a wedge to slice through to Windu. Moments later, the Plo and Adi squads join them, but a Cortosis shield shorts out K'Kruk's saber, prompting Lilith to jump into the way of an incoming spear. In what could be a taste of the dark side, the Whippet instantly slices through 3 necks, and a devastating force push clears a path. The rest of them see the fallen Padawan, and combine their strength for another push that buys them time to get her onto the ship, while the rest of the Jedi turn back to face the next wave. Inside the consular class, the Jedi find their prisoner had escaped and catch him mid-conversation with allied Devaronian forces, allies that panic when he says that he was calling from a Jedi ship. This captured man was dumber than the brutal lizards he wanted to extort, and this call would give the Jedi a way to track them down. Meanwhile, on the battlefront, a sniper landed a center mass shot on Micah. The carefree warrior used his last words to calm his friends, telling Obi-Wan not to cry, and Plo better not show some sudden sentimental side, and Qui-Gon must silence the want for revenge. As his blood spewed from his mouth, his last words were to remember the Jedi teaching and fight only to bring about peace. To his life friend Plo, he laughs at the thought that he was at a loss of words. No final insult to give, just that he will miss their adventures. He gives Plo one of his sabers, saying to hang it up as a memento if he wishes, but that he will keep one to set off the power cell in the tank to take some of these lizards with him into the Force. The young Obi-Wan pleads, but Plo turns to his old friend and says, "May the Force be with you." They run off, and when the Inkori surround Micah, he says that he will reveal the most important Jedi secret. As a scaled face comes close, he says that the secret is they are not afraid to die, activating the blade and consuming them all. He was smiling as he left this realm, though the departure of this soul was sensed by his friends, who all bowed their heads with respect. A death that was also sensed all the way off on Coruscant, even by Darth Sidious. Using the coordinates from the holo transmission, they track the Devaronian group to a planet near the sun of this solar system. And on the way, Qui-Gon assures Windu that this loss was not due to any error on his part, but just the reality of battle. And both agree that Plo Koon would be hit the worst. As they approach, they find an enormous fleet that was expecting them. A barrage of fire punched through their shields, and all seemed lost as they careened through the capital ship formation, until they were saved by a shower of green turbolaser fire coming from Republic security forces. Yoda was able to get these forces deployed just in time. A sad exchange for so many slain Jedi during this conflict was that he and Valorum knew that the public and even rival politicians would challenge the use of the Navy in this instance. And while the RSF was blowing through the fleet, Master Tin was making a bold entrance and using the consular as a battering ram to storm the enemy HQ. Knowing their main army was lost, their navy was becoming space debris, and elite Jedi surrounded them, the marauding beasts turned into sniveling cowards begging for mercy. Mason Gallia remembered Aporancis' words that the might is right types change their tune when they meet an overwhelming force. And just as soon as it started, with a simple call made to all their forces, the Inkori threat was gone. But Yoda knew they were not the true enemy. Some phantom menace was behind this, and while Windu agreed, he knew they must turn their attention to filling Micah's seat on the council, suggesting that instead of the hard-hitted Qui-Gon Jinn, he wanted to nominate Ki-Adi-Mundi. Shortly after this, a young girl from the planet of Shili in the expansion region was making waves in the Force. Plo Koon was drawn to the homeworld of the Togruta species and felt an intense presence from a 3-year-old named Ahsoka Tano. Her people understood the Jedi path, and she was brought back to the temple to begin her training. Plo would forever feel close to little Soka, and though not her clan instructor or even her master, he maintained a fatherly role in her life from the moment he found her. He would take on the responsibility of training Micah's Padawan, Boltar Swan, leading her to the rank of knight before she went off to have a long and storied career. And it wasn't long before the problem of the Cortosis weapons was popping up again. Their intel confirmed that a terrorist group called the Jinha were processing Cortosis ore on the planet Oberdan.
We are sending Masters Plo Koon and Eth Koth to investigate. We shall soon learn more.
But this group, like the Inkori, had received a mysterious and rapid increase in arms, which they used to shoot down a Jedi transport containing Masters Koth and Koon. Barely making it out alive, they were captured, prompting the Council to immediately dispatch nearby Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. They all witnessed a Trade Federation gunship flying overhead, pointing to a link between their shaky allies and this terrorist group. A few days later, Plo would take the time to help Obi-Wan improve his saber technique, noting the boy was proving exceptional with the blade. Then around the same time, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were sent to Naboo to negotiate a peaceful resolution to the Trade Federation's blockade. Plo had taken another apprentice, a female Trandoshan named Lasark. When the unorthodox Master Jin returned from his mission, he reported the most troubling statement made in this chamber in the past 1,000 years.
My only conclusion can be that it was a Sith Lord.
Many of them know that as impossible as it seemed that the Sith lived, deep down they knew that this could explain the sharp rise in violence, organized crime with tools like Cortosis blades that were aimed at killing Jedi. And Plo and the rest of the Council were also well aware that Jin, like his master Dooku, was obsessed with old prophecies and the more mystical living force.
A virgins, you say?
Located around a person?
A boy. His cells have the highest concentration of midichlorians I have seen in a life form. It is possible he was conceived by the midichlorians.
Heathcoth and Adigadia look at each other in shock, but Plo calmly absorbs this bold claim. But they also knew that Jin would not make these claims lightly. The boy would be tested, but they had come to the decision to not train young Anakin Skywalker. Plo Koon was in agreement in this vote, mostly resting on the issue of attachments. And at 9, he was about 3 times the normal age. He had already established powerful attachments to his mother, and it was already talking back to the Grand Master of the High Council. For Plo and the rest, these negatives outweighed his high midichlorian count. In fact, the high count was even more reason not to train him, that the risk of his falling was greater than any of them. When Jin pushed that he would take the boy on as a Padawan, that Obi-Wan was ready for his trials, Windu and Yoda shut the conversation down and say they need to focus on the Naboo crisis and hopefully draw out the red blade-wielding attacker. Plo's friend would end up losing his life in his effort to expose this secret Sith Lord. Though Obi-Wan seemed to have killed the Sith, his first move as a Jedi Knight was to defy the entire High Council.
Qui-Gon's defiance I sense in you. Need that you do not. Your apprentice, Skywalker, will be.
And all Jedi were left to meditate on the most important question of the millennia.
Which was destroyed, the Master or the Apprentice?
And though he was against bringing Anakin in, once he was accepted, Plo was one of the voices. While almost always stoic and often quiet during council meetings, he was passionate that Qui-Gon's intuition and final wishes should be honored, and helped to sway the sentiment among his peers. When they returned home from the funeral, they would discover a horrific scene, as the body of Yaddle was found in the workers' district. Dooku had stepped away from the Order for 10 years by now at the time of Qui-Gon's death, but still had good relations with his friends in the Order. It was not a hostile rejection, but personal troubles that the now Count Dooku claimed were drawing him back to his homeworld of Sereno. Secretly, he had come to work with the Sith Lord Darth Sidious, initially hoping to understand and expose the mysterious threat, but due to the incompetence of the Order and the brilliance and power shown by the Sith, he would choose to fully embrace the dark side. This same year, conflict would come to the planet Malastare, and the High Council was meeting to discuss their next move, all joining in shared meditation to focus on their ideals of the governing body, saying in unison their mantra, "May the Force be with us all, and may the peace of this temple be ours, a place open to thought and speech, a realm of mutual respect, and haven of shared noble purpose. Let us take our seats together, with no one above others. May we work together in trust, free from the restraints of ego and jealousy, at this gathering and all others to come." Yoda opens up to Adi to explain a new peace mission. She lays out the plight of the people of Lannick, who have been enduring terrorist attacks by the Red Yarrow organization. Master Peel had suffered a deep scar in his face from the last attack, defending his homeworld when the bombers nearly took out the High Court and Corellian representatives, who were Gallia's biological mother and father. Despite their claim to have no attachments, Gallia felt she owed him a special debt, and told the council that the Red Yarrows wanted to negotiate a ceasefire with the High Court on the neutral world of Malastare. The Supreme Chancellor asked that 6 Jedi be sent with judicial forces to act as arbiters. Plo would volunteer, along with Ki-Adi-Mundi, Peel, Gallia, Yaddle, and Windu. When they arrive, they see the capital is celebrating the largest pod race of the season, with Malastare being a staple in the pod racing circuit long before the Hutt's hot new track on Tatooine. When the Counselor touched down, they are greeted by the gregarious Grand Magistrate, who is quick to see that their every need will be attended to. Plo tells him they need only a roof, sleeping mats, and cookware, and that they could find a way to make do on their own. Windu explains that they do not need comforts. and Master Peel points out that nobody needs a servant, calling out the practice of what amounted to the enslavement of the native Dug population by the Grand Colonists. Nervously, the magistrate makes the Dugs say it was an honor to serve, and as they are whisked away to the palace, all can sense that they are being tracked through the spaceport, and Peel and Gallia lead the attackers into a trap. Grand Guards seem clueless to the blaster fire, and the targets escape, with the leader acting not so surprised at the firefight. Windu points out that this spaceport had tight security. It was more likely that someone from the inside helped the assassins get those weapons past the checkpoints. In the royal chamber, being served by a Dug slave, Senator Axe Mo was sipping fine wine and calming the nerve of his assassins, promising that by sunrise, the Jedi would all be dead. Outside the main chamber, the Jedi were forced to wait in front of enormous doors to the palace, and Ki-Adi-Mundi's Padawan was growing restless. Asherad Het was raised by his father, an exiled Jedi who lived with the Tuskens. His father trained him in both Jedi and Tusken ways, and when he was orphaned via a Hutt assassin, the Order took him in, even though he was 15 years old at this point. It was complicated due to the fact that Het had trained him in the Jedi ways from an early age, just not in the typical style of the Coruscant Temple. Ki-Adi-Mundi took the youth in and saw that he was more difficult than most. Now growing restless in these palace walls, waiting, Plo stepped in to help the boy calm his mind, saying that no matter where he found himself, either in the desert or within these four walls, there was something of life and creation to be in awe of. To use this moment as a meditation on the history and beauty that surrounds him. Gallia steps in to critique this art, as the Grand was using these skilled artisans to craft monuments to their oppression of the natives. But Plo says that that only adds to this lesson from the Force. The mystery of life, that beauty could shine through, even through bad intentions or base material. And just then, the Grand emerged to thank the Lannic Prince and say that his party was ready. When they enter, the prince is dismissive of Master Peel, and when the terrorist leader arrives, he makes a joke about how even Peel's facial scar makes it easier to recognize him after all these years. The master responds that it reminds him of the Red Yaro's cowardice that day, that though he was scarred, those red shirts were dead. Mace cuts off this back and forth and says that if all are interested in peace, then peace they shall have. But the Padawan senses a disturbance, a feeling that Plo Koon shares, and he warns the others that something is off. Only a few minutes in, the prince was shouting at his own advisor, calling the Jedi freaks, and threatening to storm out. The Grand was adamant to have these lines recorded in the official record, and when Mace says that they needed to adjourn, the Grand also makes sure that the old Lannic advisor provides the Jedi with his personal transport. As they travel through the city, they can hear the pod racers coming closer, and when they come into the path of a cam droid, the prince's advisor springs his trap. Rips open his shirt to reveal a bomb vest, and Plo recognizes the thermite. Mundi makes a joke, while even Peel's old friend explains that he had come to see that the Red's way was the only way to restore their planet's traditions. But Peel is quick and slashes their transport in half. The would-be revolutionaries turn into a nice fireworks show, as the Jedi in the second shuttle toss their attackers out before they can detonate. As they fall, they grab onto a pod racer, which happened to be the champion of Malastare, Sebulba, who was now furious that his win was being threatened during the main event on his homeworld. He was quick to dislodge them, and Yaddle was right there to intercept. They all agree that the Grand must be secretly funding the Reds, hoping to exploit the natural resources on Lannic. And as they planned to capture the prince, Peel was concerned that if his old friend had flipped, this prince must be no good either. In the Grand's palace, the prince's quarters were raided with the help of more traitors in his own guard. Seconds away from being fed to a pack of ack dogs, the Jedi burst in to slay the beasts and capture everyone involved. The leader of the Reds rocketed away with a concealed jetpack right into the path of a pod racer to be instantly vaporized. These dogs came from Mace Windu's homeworld, where they were seen as family members, with a supernatural bond between them. So Windu went off to hunt down the black market sellers on Nar Shaddaa that had profaned this bond, a process that involved torturing these creatures to turn them into fight dogs. Plo and Peel discuss how there is nothing the Jedi can do for now but monitor any connection between the Grand and their insufferable prince. Since the threat of the Reds was gone, they could at least say they had brought peace to Lannic. 2 years later, in 30 PBY, the Kifar were outraged with the Jedi Order, demanding that Quinlan Vos, this son of Kifu, be allowed to return home. The Guardians of Kifu were the police and military force of his people, and their leader was angry that they were robbed of this powerful Force sensitive. This leader was his own aunt, Tinte Voss, and she screamed at her nephew that his psychometric powers, the ability to see the past by touching events, was an ability cultivated by their people. As High General, or Shafe, she claimed that the Republic had abandoned their sector of the galaxy, and the Guardians were the only ones keeping peace. With the revelation of Darth Maul, every disturbance in the Force was treated as a possible connection to the Master or Apprentice that was lurking somewhere in the galaxy. To further complicate things, Masters Tin and Poof both felt that Quinlan had been moving closer to the dark side. He was powerful, but at times would draw strength from feelings of anger and vengeance. Windu knows that this stems from the loss of Aayla Secura, Voss's Padawan that was drugged, causing her to lose her memory, and then was lost somewhere off in the galaxy being manipulated by dark side powers. Windu promises to find her and sends him off to his kin to investigate the attack on a prison that killed all the Guardians and released all of the convicts. As he investigated, he was ambushed by the vampiric and Zadi species. His old master Thulm got there in time to rescue him, but he saw that the memory-deleting drug had devastated his old Padawan too. Voss barely recognized him, and as they continued the investigation, they find the Deveronian merc that escaped during the mission that took the life of Master Micah. They needed to work with him to navigate the underworld here, events that would lead them to running into the fallen Aayla and the armies of Anzadi, as well as the restored ancient Sith magician Volf Karko. He was once a fallen Jedi from the time of the Old Republic, and had been locked in stasis all these years through a combo of Sith magic and advanced tech. One of the last things they heard back from Voss was that the Dark Dreamer was released. And when they lost contact with Coruscant, Windu ordered Plo Koon and Adigalia to join him and head to Kifex. Assuming their Jedi were dead, the mission was to make sure Karko was captured or killed before he could escape off-world. As they approached in a trio of consulars, the Shafe hails them and is furious to have more Jedi arriving. Windu calmly tells her that they are aware that the Guardians were holding high-priority prisoners that were supposed to be transferred to Republic control, and that they, along with this ancient Dark Jedi, had escaped. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine was willing to provide the Jedi with everything asked for in the capture of Karko. On the surface, Voss was able to get through the Twi'lek's twisted mind and get her to come back to the light. And with the help of his old master speaking to him through the Force, he cut down the ancient Anzadi. But as he tried to leave, the Guardians opened fire on them, citing strict orders from his own aunt to shoot down any ship trying to escape. Luckily, the Jedi fleet was able to throw the weight of the Republic at these starfighters, and all stood down. Plo looked on as the healed Aayla agreed to train with Master Thulm, and the troubled Voss said that he wished to stay on his homeworld and train with the local mystical Force tradition of Zhao's Path. In just a few years, more Jedi had died, been touched by the dark side, or chose to step away from the Order than the last several hundred centuries combined. Plo and the other masters knew that this had to be connected to the hidden Sith Lord, an enemy that was skilled in violence, but also the subtle manipulation of public opinion, as media manipulation was already leading to decreased support for the Jedi Order among the average citizen, with a growing self-righteousness seen in young activists. As one Holo News article read, activists deface Jedi Temple lobby, Jedi Temple, Coruscant. A mob of 20 university students attempting to infiltrate the Jedi Temple yesterday managed to get as far as the second atrium lobby before being handily contained by the Jedi. Unharmed, the students shouted cries of tyranny and oppression and free baby Ludi as they were delivered to judicial holding pens. At 0700 yesterday morning, a sociology tour group of the University of Coruscant entered the temple's public lobby. They then unleashed pre-programmed graffiti bombs with such messages as "Brood Snatchers," "Baby Ludi wants her mom," "Justice, Peace, and Kidnappings," and logos of the People's Inquest movement in the polished interior. Two younger Jedi Padawan attempted to contain the activists, but were unwilling to injure them with their brandished lightsabers. The unruly mob pushed into the second atrium when Jedi Masters Ki-Adi-Mundi and Plo Koon arrived. "Disperse immediately," commanded Koon. "You are likely to injure yourselves if you continue, and we do not want that to happen." "We will disperse immediately," repeated the crowd uniformly. "We are likely to injure ourselves if we continue, and you do not want that to happen." Jedi Padawans then affixed the students with hand binders, by which time judicial officials arrived with a transport speeder. The students were loaded into the speeder, by which time the Jedi trance had worn off, and they again became agitated. The Jedi Council has refused comment on the disturbance. Genova Belaine, currently reviewing the script of the upcoming Holo feature of her story, was unavailable for comment, but her spokeswoman, agent, and leader of the People's Inquest, Thrinka Paudet, did field a call from HoloNet News. quote, "I salute those that continue our efforts. Remember, vigilance. Who watches the watchman, I ask? I have to go. I have another call," said Pa Duente. We can be sure that after passing through many hands, the credits that funded these movements could be traced back to Darth Sidious. And by 28 BBY, the Fallen One had reared up to announce himself as the leader of the Separatist movement. Count Dooku was head of state in the Confederacy of Independent Systems, leader of the Separatist Parliament and Council. For now, the CIS claimed to wish to work with the Republic, some worlds having representatives in both bodies, and acting more like a large political faction or lobby pushing for better conditions and autonomy in the mid and outer rims. Plo had to acknowledge that over these past 3 decades, things had only gotten worse for these rims of space, while Coruscanti politicians and megacorporations were getting rich and powerful. One of their largest members was the Trade Federation, who was so powerful that they, a company, not a planet, had their own Senate seat. But they were also the main providers of jobs and security for most of the disgruntled worlds that made up the CIS. Plo knew that the Neimoidians only cared about themselves, but he also knew the same could be said for most senators. This series of events was covered in the phantom fingerprints of the Sith, and all wondered how far their old friend Dooku had fallen. In 22 BBY, the tensions would hit an all-time high with a brazen assassination attempt on the Trade Federation's #1 enemy, Senator Padme Amidala of Naboo. All while the Chancellor was meeting with the High Council to discuss the pending vote for the formal secession of the CIS worlds.
More and more star systems are joining the Separatists.
Yoda admits with the growing influence of the dark side, he cannot see if war is on the horizon, and when Padme arrives with her retinue, she accuses the Separatists and Count Dooku of the attempt on her life. But the Jedi cannot believe this is possible.
He is a political idealist, not a murderer.
You know, milady, Count Dooku was once a Jedi. He couldn't assassinate anyone.
When another attempt was foiled, Obi-Wan pulled on the threads and ended up unveiling a secret clone army being built for the Jedi. No one on the High Council was aware of this, and this news was followed up by another shocking report from Kenobi.
The Commerce Guilds and the Corporate Alliance have both pledged their armies to Count Dooku and are forming a... Wait. All felt they may have just witnessed their friends slaughtered by Dooku's illegal forces, and the council agreed that their only hope was to use the suspicious and secret army from Kamino. Mace and Yoda would reveal this all to the Supreme Chancellor and to his top advisors, who proposed that emergency powers must be given to Palpatine in order to declare the creation of an army. There was no time for the political red tape and senatorial bickering. Jar Jar would put in the vote, and with thunderous applause, the Jedi had their cover for the army whose formation itself could have been seen as treasonous. The Jedi had not led a formal army for nearly 1,000 years, but the cloners' training proved highly effective, and the past decades of violence had made the transition easier for the Jedi, now taking on the dual title of Jedi Generals, something Plo Koon was deeply disturbed by. But he also knew that, like the beauty that can be found in cruel nature or propagandist art, the Jedi's true role was to navigate these troubling times by connecting with the individual people they met along the way, and the conflict that was now deemed the Clone Wars. With the opening battle of Geonosis being a decisive Republic victory, each of the top Jedi generals were assigned command of Venator Star Destroyers and a battalion of clone troopers. Plo would be assigned an entire fleet, and his flagship would be the Venator Triumphant, and attached to the 104th Battalion, led by Clone Commander 3636, aka Wolffe. The 104th would create stylized wolf patches and come to be known throughout the Grand Army of the Republic as the Wolf Pack. Their first assignment was to the core world Brentel 4. This unique world had large ice caps framing a band of rocky terrain. Shakti was leading the assault on the headquarters of the Separatist commander, Shogar Tak. The position of this core world was vital, and as he was told that they had already lost a quarter of their forces, Plo explained that losing Brental 4 could mean the loss of the Perlimian trade route and cut off their access to the Tion cluster, which housed the Separatist capital on Raxus. As Shakti describes the battlefront conditions, Plo asks about her condition. She says she is fine, but cut off from Agen Kohler's forces, and Plo tells her to retreat to the safety of a nearby prison complex. When she enters, she finds the prisoners in the middle of a riot and is nearly killed by a raging Wookiee. A force push knocks him out, and she learns that the memory of his family being slaughtered by Mandalorians caused him to have these violent outbursts. She's also stunned to find Quinlan Vos is locked up too, and he catches her up on the fact that someone was using Republic codes to confuse the invasion force, and that here, even in the core, these people considered the Jedi their enemy.
When they discover a sewer system that leads to the palace, Master T tells Plo to feign a retreat and return in 4 hours, while the Jedi on world split up their forces. In the battle within the palace, she would come up against another Cortosis weapon, while one of the clones sacrificed himself to take out the planetary defense cannons and shield generators. Plo's fleet descends through the atmosphere and is able to mop up the remaining enemy forces, while Voss rescued Republic prisoners, and Shaak Ti killed their leadership. Once the battle was over, and Master T was out of her Bacta tank, Plo met with her to discuss these troubling events. This war may have just started for the galaxy, but the Jedi knew their ideals had been slipping for a while, and Shaak Ti could see how this war would warp them all. The Jedi were now imposing leadership on people. It all seemed to be for the right end, but this way of thinking was dangerously close to the ideals of a benevolent tyrant, who would come in and kill all who opposed their vision. To make it worse, the chaos of war was robbing the Jedi of the time that would be dedicated to meditating in the Force to find answers. Plo agrees and tells her it is right to question Shaak Ti, even if there are no answers. Come, let us meditate together tomorrow. We can be generals and fight this war again. For now, we are simply Jedi and old friends. Shortly after this, Plo and Adi would take their starfighter squadrons to respond to an SOS from Senator Organa, still in a standard consular, not the modified Chargers. It was being overwhelmed not by separatists, but pirates hoping that the Republic was spread too thin to defend him. With the help of their hyperdrive rings, the Delta 7s and V-19 Torrents are able to outmaneuver and obliterate the enemy ships, staying alongside them to ensure a safe passage to Coruscant. And to Shaak Ti's point about them having no time for the Force, it was just hours later that he and Gallia would be off to help Mundi, Skywalker, and Kenobi. It seemed that Kenobi had been killed on world, but Anakin felt that he was still alive. He wanted to see if Plo or Adi could sense him, and when even the highly telepathic Kel Dor could not, he reminds the boy to trust his feelings, that a bond between Master and Padawan were the strongest of all. Adi agrees, and she and Koon would clear out the enemy fighters while the Padawan made it planetside to help Kenobi. From here, it was off to Rendili to help an old friend. Jace Dallin had been a young man during the defense of Mount Avos during the Stark Hyperspace War. Seeing Plo's calm and brilliant leadership during what should have been their total defeat would forever inspire him during his rise to become the Rendili fleet commander. Rendili Star Drives was like Kuat Drive Yards, an ancient and powerful shipwright, with their planetary defense fleet of dreadnoughts being one of the most powerful navies in the galaxy. The people had decided that their interests were aligned with the Separatists, but were still friendly with Republic officials, including many Jedi. Master Koon and Jando Donna would meet with Jace to try and convince him to defect. Palpatine suggested a blitzkrieg attack for their betrayal, hoping to wipe out their planetary fleets at once, and send a message to the other member worlds under Rendili's sphere of influence. Though the Jedi sought a peaceful resolution, they knew that if these dreadnoughts turned on the Republic fleets, it would mean death for tens of thousands of clones. Despite the tension everyone else was feeling, Plo greeted his old ally warmly, a hand on the man's shoulder as he assured Jace that he knew the right move was to keep the Republic intact, that this was what all his friends died for during the Stark War. Jace knew that the official story from his own government was that they willingly joined Dooku, but when confronted by Lieutenant Jango, he reveals his suspicion that their leaders had been bought off, that the puppet government was going to drag its citizens into war. In just seconds, the man pulls a blaster on his superior and orders that they are placing him under arrest on the authority of the independent provisional government of Rendili, accusing him of being a traitor. With a knife to his throat and a blaster against his head, Jace tells Plo to just let him die and kill the lieutenant, but the Jedi deactivates his blade and tells Jando Donna they must surrender as long as preserving life was still an option. Jango explains to his men that they will use the prisoners to buy time, and brags to Plo that soon Dooku will be sending reinforcements that would trap the Republic fleet. Plo assures him that although Master Tin will have a heavy heart, he will give the orders to destroy the dreadnoughts even with them on board. Looking to call his bluff, he opens a channel with the acclimators and screams that he will rip off Plo's mask and let him drown in the oxygen before their eyes if they do not leave. The stoic Kel Dor explains, with blaster to his neck, that the man was at a disadvantage because he feared death, while the Jedi did not. Tin gives very clear instructions, unwavered by the threat. They have 1 hour to stand down, before turbolaser bolts and missiles start flying. If they kill any hostages before that, the might of the Republic would descend on them immediately. Saesee Tin was arguably the best pilot in the galaxy for decades, but was realizing that young Skywalker was quickly taking the mantle. Together they worked on modifying the Azure Angel, a ridiculously fast and maneuverable Delta 7. And Anakin said he was confident that by going solo, he could evade the Dreadnought's defenses and disable their navicomputer, ensuring they could not jump to hyperspace. But to further complicate things, Kenobi had arrived with Voss, the renegade who was reeking of arrogance and the stench of the dark side. Kenobi claimed he was here to turn himself into the Council, and Tin was fuming that this drama was playing out in the middle of the battle. He ordered him to hand over his saber and be locked up and await transport to Coruscant for review by the High Council. By now, the hour was up, but Separatist core ships appeared to back up the Rendili fleet. Tin ordered all fighters to launch. The battle was intense, with acclimators losing their power, and a third of their starfighters were scrapped. And with the energy grid in the prison wing down, Voss was free to grab his saber and blaster. Anakin was moving to disable the enemy flagship, while Captain Jango was preparing for a high-risk linked hyperspace jump. Myths abounded about the fate of the Katana fleet that went missing in Chiss space after they supposedly went mad from the unique hyperspace effects on the mind coming from this dangerous linked jump. Meanwhile, Plo Koon was deep in meditation, plainly revealing to his cellmates that rescue was imminent. Voss had proved his loyalty, stealing a ship not to escape, but join up with Kenobi in his rescue mission. Together, the Jedi, Jace, and Dodonna were able to free the other Republic loyalists, and even Yeago's second-in-command folded as Plo slashed his way toward him, blasting the mutineers and declaring everyone lay down their arms and obey the Jedi. Jace would move toward the bridge and end up killing Jango, and immediately contacting General Tin to announce the dreadnoughts would be turning their fire on the core ships. And together, this joint fleet made quick work of the CIS forces, clearing all of Rendili space. Plo and Jace happy to have made it through another treacherous mission. It wasn't long before Mace was holding another mission briefing, explaining that with the loss of Nexus Ortai, nearly 24 worlds were lost in the Outer Rim, and they would need to strike at the major shipyards of the CIS. When Mace says the banking clan's factory should be hit next, Palpatine speaks up to say that the Senate would never allow this. The IGBC was neutral, providing loans and products to both sides of the war. It should not force them to cut off the Republic. Kenobi counters this by saying they could hit only the factories producing ships for the CIS and compensate them for their loss. The insanity that these credits would be paid back by the credits loaned out from the central banking clan in the first place, but it seemed like the only plausible short-term solution for this immediate threat. Plo pulls up the Gori system and says that while a full-scale attack was off the table, a small force could act as saboteurs. He goes on to say the main problem was the increased security. This was the first droid-only zone that they had encountered. Details were scarce. All they knew is that ships entering this orbit were irradiated, killing any organics on board while doing no damage to the droids. All were confused how Anakin planned on getting through the irradiators, but he revealed a unique solution, saying he heard of bounty hunters on Tatooine that would transport their catch safely and off of scanners by freezing them in carbonite. He says that the radiation in any scanners would be scrambled by the carbonite shell, and he assures Rex that they won't be in long enough to get hibernation sickness. This plan did work, getting them through the port while R2 commanded their captured B-1 droids. It wasn't long before they captured the Mune shipyard, and using this they were able to get in touch with Plo in orbit, telling them that the bombers will launch the following afternoon, and he goes to brief his Hunter Squadron. His pilots picked up on the general's practice of joking in the face of death, and when they hear the mission was designated a no-returner, a pilot tells Warthog that if they make it back, he owes him drinks for the next 10 rotations. Plo explains that their target is the Equatorial Canyon, and that they will need to expect automated defenses and to seek and destroy at will once in position, as the exact coordinates were still hard to pin down. Tin explains that they will be using proton bombs for maximum damage, but this means they will have to escape their own blast zone quickly. He continues that they will have to get past the blockade by performing an experimental new tactic, a precision hyperspace jump that pops them out in between the capital ship and the planet. The pilots knew it hadn't been done before, but Plo assured them that there was only a moderate risk of collision or being spaghettified by the gravity fluctuations. On-world, the Jedi had been betrayed by the slaves they freed. The propaganda and sheer terror instilled in them led one to alert their overlord. The Mune laughed once the Jedi had been captured, admitting that the Jedi really were there to save them, to get them out of the blast radius before they bombed the facility, and that the only reason the CIS used organic slaves was to act as living shields around high-priority targets. Hours later, the experimental tactic worked, and the squadrons were dipping into the atmosphere, pilots all joking with each other, and Plo had to make sure that their minds were focused on the run. In the Mune's palace, he gets an alert that bombers were making their approach, and he notices that the slaves were gone. His own female servant had faked an attraction to lower his defenses, and was able to help return the Jedi's blades as they helped move the slaves to a transport. It turned out that the Mune calling them all idiots only helped to motivate a slave revolt and free the Jedi. Tin and Koon led the bomber squadrons, taking out their anti-air defenses, allowing the Y-Wings to deliver their payload. Plo points out that they are only hitting the top hangar, that most of them aren't even being damaged. Tin says they can still call us a victory and to peel off, but Plo thinks outside the box, telling the fighters to switch their target to the support. Just as the Munificent full of slaves and Jedi saviors was peeling off, the proton bombs found their mark and the target was completely destroyed. As the shipyard was collapsing, they raced back up to orbit to destroy the radiation beam gate, scrapping it just seconds before it delivered these thousands of slaves a horribly painful death. With immune slaver in hysterics, the Delta 7s would take refuge in the Munificent's hangar, and the Republic strike team escaped through hyperspace. Once the debriefs were over, the Jedi could catch their breath, and excited Anakin asked about the details of the experimental hyperspace tactic. Though Tin said he wouldn't recommend it, Skywalker couldn't wait to try it. Then it was off to Cormendi to capture a crucial trading outpost where Amir Wat Tambor was personally controlling Separatist forces. Before they launch, Plo checks in with his commander to make sure he understands this mission would depend on the Wolfpack. Wolffe was confident and all smiles, and moments later they were making their descent through the clouds of droid starfighters, Plo leading from his custom Delta 7 named the Blade of Doran, a gift from the mechanical genius Anakin Skywalker, similar to the Azure Angel built by Anakin and Saesee Tiin. He reminded the ARC-170s that they needed to keep the vultures buzzing around them and keep their attention from the LA-ATs. The trade port turned fortress was impervious to large craft, but by approaching via jetpack, this smaller, nimble force was able to outmaneuver the anti-aircraft guns. And though the D-Wing droids did give them some trouble, they do make it to the command center, and Wolffe is stopped in his tracks by Tambor and his hostage. He ignores the clones' pleas and sets the entire station to blow, being whisked off by his droids while the clones struggle to gain their balance and save the woman. As they race back to the gunship, they see their general was waiting for them with an open hand, and the first thing he asks is if all his men were okay. Wolffe is quick to apologize for failing the mission. He knew how important it was to secure the Nexus and capture Tambor, but Plo brushes this all off as inconsequential, saying that he sees the entire unit was safe, they saved a hostage, that they both trusted each other to do their parts and survive this mission, but that in war, you couldn't hope for much more than this. Wolffe would think back to this during the Republic's siege of Hissene. They joined forces with the 212th and 501st in a mission that could see the capture of Dooku and Ventress. The Jedi were facing the Sith while the clones protected the citizens, and during the battle, Plo was desperately trying to contact Wolffe to tell him to change the mission and move on to protect the Parliament. But the transmission was too broken up to understand. Boost tells Wolffe that he received coordinates, and he reasons that the Jedi must want them to move to this new location. However, Cody says that they should not change the plan without direct orders. They can't just speculate in the middle of the battle. Rex tells him not to worry, that the Blue Boys could hold down this position, and Cody leaves the final decision to Wolffe. Knowing that Plo did trust them, he moves through the coordinates and finds a droid force taking the Parliament hostage. And also knowing the enemy was willing to kill innocent civilians, they were quick to drop a few droid poppers, freeing everyone just in time to respond to Rex's call for backup. Waves of clankers surrounded them, and they were all about to be executed when the Jedi came to the rescue, droids sliced in half by sabers for the end of another successful mission. Later this year, still in 22 BBY, Plo would be in command of a trio of Venators patrolling the core, searching for a mysterious new CIS superweapon that had destroyed dozens of capital ships, leaving no witnesses. It would be near the Red Giant of Abrigado that he first laid his silver eyes on the subjugator class named the Malevolence.
I think it wise to report our position before we attack.
Skywalker was nearby, but for once, the young man was saying he needed to obey his orders and stay put. Before Plo could explain further, the Separatists are able to jam communications. Plo gives the order to fire, but they were out of range, and in a split second, the massive ion pulse from the prototype rushes towards them. Plo yelling the order to get everyone to the escape pods, as their entire fleet is consumed. With shields down, the enemy turbo lasers opened up, and the Venators returned into massive chunks of debris, compounding the damage further.
That his fleet was destroyed like the others. We are about to prepare a rescue mission.
The Council and Supreme Chancellor give orders to stay on defense out of fear of losing more Venators, while Ahsoka pleads they must go save her old friend and mentor. Anakin sharply rebukes her and says they need to respect protocol, but then shows her how it's done, taking his own ship, the Twilight, to go search Plo's last known location. Master Koon would have likely played a role in making Ahsoka the Padawan of Skywalker, being on the Council when that decision was made. And these two didn't realize it yet, but they were the latest great example of how the Council made pairs that showed the weaknesses of each other's dominant traits. Plo learned to respect the informal style of his master, Tyvaka, while Plo helped Tyvaka calm down. Young Kenobi was actually quite rebellious and learned to respect protocol out of response to the extremely loose and spontaneous style of Qui-Gon. And Skywalker would see just how dangerous and problematic it was to always want to jump into the next battle and do whatever you thought was right. As much as Plo was a mentor to little Ahsoka, they all knew they were too dissimilar, but Tano and Skywalker would realize how hypocritical they were, taking turns being reckless and then being annoyed when the other one was being disobedient. Only that would teach both the wisdom of having some sort of structure and hierarchy of command. Luckily for Plo, this pairing also worked to teach Ahsoka how to do good without being directly disobedient, leaving the Venators on defense just as the superiors ordered, and taking on this personal craft to search for Plo, because even his own men thought the right move was to leave them for dead.
Strategically, it doesn't make any sense for someone to come look for us. If I was in command, I'd be hunting that weapon down.
I value your life more than finding that weapon.
As they float, they see that the pods had been broken up. Something had killed all the troopers inside, and the Master knows that they are not alone. Then they pick up on the frantic calls for help from another pod, confirming a droid search and destroy team was diligently going about racking up more war crimes. Anakin was now searching through the debris, and having only been her master for a few days at this point, he asks why she has such strong feelings for Plo.
He's one of my oldest friends. It was Master Plo Koon who found me and brought me to the temple where I belonged. Now he's lost, so I thought maybe I could find him.
A Droch-class boarding ship locked onto them, and as it approached, Plo was calm and motivating.
This is a difficult situation, but there remains a possibility we will survive.
A firefight erupted as the troopers and their general moved out to engage the jetpack-equipped B-1s, as the Droch started crushing the pod, releasing their air supply into the void of space. Koon used the Force to send out his wolves to flank the droids, while he was able to slice their pod free. This bought them some time, but as the Droch exploded, Grievous knew they must have run into some survivors. While Plo was ever stoic, he and his men clung to the pierced pod, and their cynicism showed itself again.
Sergeant, why are you so certain no one is coming?
We're just clones, sir. We're meant to be expendable.
Not to me.
Plo detected little Ahsoka in the Force and used his great telepathic powers to guide her. Once they are safely brought into the Bay of the Twilight, his first thought is to ask about the others.
Tell me, were there any survivors?
We couldn't find anybody else.
This moment of peace was short-lived, as they spot the Malevolence coming right towards them. Plo snaps into action, shutting down all the ship systems to evade their scanners. Then they hear R2, but with the push of a button, they think they had safely removed their electrical signature. But in the prototype superweapon, a technician noticed the faint presence of a single droid on the scanners. The enemy moves to intercept, just as the med droid steps into the cockpit. They all know they had been detected, and Skywalker races through the debris to avoid the plasma eye of death that was closing on them. With only a second to spare, they do make the jump through hyperspace. They rejoin Anakin's fleet and quickly plan a counterstrike.
We'll concentrate our firepower on the bridge superstructure.
But Plo is concerned.
Minimal casualties may be enough to prevent you from breaking Grievous's defenses.
Master Plo is right.
Koon knows that with the top general of the entire Separatist military, the bridge would be one of the most heavily defended targets the Republic had faced at this point. And Plo muses with Ahsoka on how Skywalker's ability to inspire confidence stemmed from his history of leading the charge into blaster fire, while the Malevolence was busy destroying more Republic ships, from Venators to Pelta-class medical transports. Plo and Admiral Yularen get word of this as Anakin was prepping the Y-Wing squadrons, and they all agree that the next CIS target will be a major medical station near Naboo. In order to intercept them, they would have to take a dangerous shortcut through the Kaleida Nebula.
Any help is welcome, Master Plo. Just try not to fall behind.
I had a feeling you'd be coming along. Your ship has already been prepped.
All knew that Plo was up there with the best pilots in the Order, just under Saesee Tiin and Skywalker himself. The Kaminoan in charge of this facility is warned by Kenobi, and she is told that aid is being sent from Naboo as well. When they arrive at the nebula, Plo reminds everyone just how dangerous this would be, knowing that these clones would be purely relying on Skywalker's own secret path. And when they enter, he supports Anakin's advice to the Padawan.
Skywalker is right, Ahsoka. Clear your mind, young one, and you will see the path.
When she asks more questions about how he knows about this path, Anakin says he heard about it from smugglers, and hearing this was the Balmorra Run, Plo is uncharacteristically panicked.
Balmorra Run?
I think I'm picking up a contact.
Skywalker, listen to me. We need to turn around.
On cue, an enormous group of Nibre mantis swarm over them. Plo knows that now their only course is to calmly weave through them. One of the bombers was hit, suffering some minor damage to its engine, prompting the Master to remind them of how narrow their margin of success was.
If we lose even a single ship, our mission is that much closer to failure.
With 500 turbolasers and dozens of Ultra Droid squadrons, Grievous laughs at the blips on his radar, expecting this to be an easy victory. But as the pilots blast their way closer, he gives the order to fire the superweapon. The ion pulse closes the gap so fast that many of his own droid starfighters were hit, and the damaged Y-Wing's engines explode trying to push past the disk, causing the ship to crash into his brothers, killing the crew instantly and costing them these 2 bombers, while another 3 Y-Wings were disabled by the ion pulse. The Subjugator class had few point defense systems, but the flak from the sheer volume of turbolaser fire drops even more bombers, and Ahsoka pleads with her master to see that while he may be able to cut through this, the clones could not. And without stepping on the young man's command, Plo doesn't pull his rank and try to order Anakin to change the plan, but does suggest they change their target from the bridge to the weapon itself. As it was charging up to fire on the medical station, the Y-Wings whipped around and delivered the payload just as it was set to fire. The explosion and chain reaction worked to cripple the entire behemoth, just as Kenobi's fleet popped out of hyperspace. With the Malevolence in flames and limping away, the Venators were the ones opening fire this time, while Plo made sure to congratulate Anakin, knowing this human was eager to push on and kill the CIS leader.
Great job, Master Skywalker. Your leadership skills are most impressive.
With an engine array the size of the Republic's greatest capital ship, they keep firing into the beast, waiting for a catastrophic failure.
But the ship is so massive it can take all the fire our cannons can give it.
We must summon reinforcements.
Grievous frantically begs Count Dooku for aid, but he tells him that Padme Amidala is en route, having been given coordinates by Chancellor Palpatine, supposedly from a banking clan elite hoping to meet up for talks of leaving the CIS. But as her ship exits hyperspace, the tractor beams effortlessly pull in the tiny Naboo craft. Ahsoka notices this, and when they went to hail the mystery ship, Anakin is horrified at the sight of her being brought on board. He orders Yularen to cease fire, and though Masters Kenobi and Koon know how important this target is, they do not protest. Ahsoka would stay with Plo as Annie and Obi moved to extract the Senator, but the mission would take longer than expected. Plo worried that they would have to choose to destroy the Malevolence, now losing 2 great generals and friends along with Padme. But just then, they spot the Twilight racing towards them. He orders the turbolasers to open fire, and as the droid crew moved to use the now repaired hyperdrive, Grievous realized that choosing to hop in his personal craft Solus 1 and pursue these Jedi saved his life, as the hacked Navicomputer sent the Malevolence on a crash course for a nearby moon. And shortly after this, Plo would help finish the fight against these prototype superweapons on a mission paired with Little Ahsoka, but which also included Kenobi, Skywalker, Windu, and Fisto. They would locate and infiltrate the sister ship of the Malevolence, the other subjugator class named the Devastation, which had a laser powered by Force crystals, one of the first iterations of the idea that would eventually lead to the Death Star. It too had the ability to destroy a planet, not blow it to dust like its descendant, but enough to rip up the crust and burn away all life on world. A Night Sister named Sai Sirku would betray the new Separatist allies and use the mysterious powers of the I-Corps to take command of this weapon. She wanted to use this weapon on Coruscant and bring an end to the Jedi and Republic in one fell swoop. But this elite strike team comprised of a majority of the Jedi Council was able to set off a chain reaction to put an end to the Separatist superweapon programs. It wasn't long before he and Kenobi respond to a distress call from Windu and Fisto on Juma 9, a crucial Republic station. Cody's men blast their way through the clankers in the corridors, and the Jedi make their way to their leader, Tal Kesca, a Skakoan in a combat mech suit. Kenobi is eager to cut him down, and even doubts that the detonator he brought out was real. This is the second self-destruct threatening Skakoan he'd come across, and Plo had to be the one to calm Kenobi down.
Steady, Obi-Wan. I do not sense any deception.
The battle was intense, but eventually they were able to send him flying out of the transparasteel window. But the vacuum effect sucking them out also brought the detonator near the Skakoan's grasp, prompting Kenobi to throw his blade at it, and Plo sent his blade towards the emergency shutdown. But when the panels rapidly closed, their sabers were trapped out in space. The Force made sure these blades were picked up by Cody's forces en route, but another emergency energy shield would cut them off from the clones. Instead of waiting, the two masters used the Force as their only weapon, Plo fighting like the Baran Do sages back home, and he had to borrow from the B1s to break their friends free.
General Kenobi, Master Plo. That was an entrance worthy of young Skywalker.
After the space station was secured and the Masters returned to Coruscant for debrief and some recovery, Plo and Fisto would again work together, along with Master Top, this time combining the troopers under their command and heading out to Corm in the Mid-Rim. This ice-covered world was one of 3 in the galaxy that produced an ore called agrosite. Like coaxium, it was able to power ships at a much greater ratio than standard fuel sources, and could even be used to supercharge weapon systems. Plo stands atop the Command ATTE Walker, peering past the snow, looking for the native allies he had contacted previously, while Fisto is trying to get Captain Ozzel to chill out. The non-clone human was of the Republic Judicial Forces before the war, and was not fitting into this clone and Jedi system. Fisto tells him nobody rushes Master Plo Koon. As he exits with Commander Wolffe, the trooper asks about Plo's past, saying the boys all had a bet on how old he was. Kit said that Plo was like this long before he even came to the Jedi Temple, and the more he thinks about how Plo has the energy of youth with the demeanor of an ancient sage, he admits now he was curious too, and Plo calls back to cut them off, saying his age is irrelevant to the mission, before hopping down to greet the Cormai leader, Commander Adaru. The walrus-like biped explains that one of their own people had joined forces with Dooku, enslaving his own kind to work the Agrosite mines. As Kit gets philosophical, the Cormai plainly calls out that the Republic is only here for the ore, but the Jedi gives a predictable answer that what was on the planet belonged to the natives. Letting time be the judge, he leads the way down the treacherous mountain path towards the target. J1 proton cannons open fire not on the armored transports, but the walls of ice that surround them, and as the Jedi scramble for cover, they see that the clone troopers are running out of the armored units. Master Tot calls out the Republic captain's idiotic order, and Plo rushes forward with the Jedi flanking out to his side, sabers slashing trying to deflect the incoming bolts, teasing Kit to keep up being the young one. As one who trained frequently in the chaos meditations of the Baran Do sages, he is able to give orders in all this fire with his conventional calm, ordering Tot to take the cannons, but Kit and Plo were surrounded by battle droids. Captain Ozzel says they were in position and to open fire, that the Jedi would know how to take cover. Kit, Tot, and the native commander duck for cover as the laser fire rains down all around them, with Plo being the only one to stand tall, seeing through the force that he would be fine. They had taken the plant, but the warlord escaped via railjet. They quickly set up a perimeter and use this as their command post. Warming up and reviewing their options, the Jedi agree that with the railjet gone and the storm too intense to use air support, they would have to launch a frontal assault right into the waiting guns of the entrenched droid forces. And Ozzel reminds Wolffe that the clone's purpose is to obey orders and die if necessary. The Jedi code to protect life was irrelevant on the battlefront, but Plo wasn't having it. He stepped to him and pointed out how reckless the captain was in taking the space, and that he was aware that Ozzel only got this rank because of his personal friendship with Palpatine, that no matter how connected he was, on the battlefront, this captain would obey the orders of the Jedi generals, his superiors, eliciting a meek, "Yes, sir." Meanwhile, in orbit, a single Seppi ship breaks through the blockade, and the V-19s that try to shoot it down are ripped to shreds by the intense storm. They are able to get a message through to Plo warning him of reinforcements, and point out that the storm is focused around their objective, seeming to confirm reports that the CIS was interested in weather control tech. Plo says he and Kit would move to destroy this device, allowing them to use their air support for the main attack, and is sure to cut off complaints from the captain, and order Tot to stay with Commander Wolffe in order to hold down the fort, while he took the Devil Dogs. The elite clones of the 44th Special Operations Division shared their proud history as they raced over the frozen canyons, debating the morality of war, as in their eyes whatever brought about the fastest victory was key to saving lives, not worrying about the individuals of a particular mission. At their forward base, AATs were descending on them, with the heavy fire stunning the captain, forcing Wolffe to shuffle him to safety as Tot rushed back to the comm station. That mysterious ship that slipped through had delivered Dooku's assassin, and she detonated a charge that nearly killed the Jedi. But when he survived, and even seemed to get the advantage, beating the Night Sister and sending one of her blades flying, she showed her skills in the Force, calling it back to impale him, the Jedi falling into her arms, dying to her taunting words. Ozzel realizes he is in command now, and orders all their forces to charge at a seeming weakness in their line, despite Wolffe's sharp protest. Once the walkers were far enough from the base, Ventress sprung the trap. Dozens of spider droids erupted from the snowbanks and opened fire, killing nearly everyone in a matter of seconds. Ozzel frantically tells Wolffe to signal a surrender, but he explained they don't take prisoners, face dropping as he realizes even the captain, a friend of Palpatine, would be slaughtered without a second thought on this remote hunk of ice. As Wolffe tried to evade fire and make it back, Plo's forces were making their way up the mountain toward the weather device. They find a Corm village that was massacred by the droids, and Plo instantly goes to carving out graves for them as Commander Adaru moves the bodies. Sharp, the Devil Dog leader, was annoyed by this pointless gesture, but Kit argued that it was acts like this that truly kept the Republic alive, if the Republic was to mean anything at all. And as they finish the burials, Plo defends the clones' reaction, telling Kit to remember they did not have the training of a Jedi. As Kit wonders if this coldness from the troops, and even the natives towards their own people, would become more common as the war dragged on, Plo admits that he had never seen the galaxy in such a brutal state. joking not even in his many years. Nonetheless, it was up to them to be the light in the ever-growing darkness. As Sharp butts in, adding that the droid's lack of ethics had already been the deciding factor in many CIS victories. Plo does get the man to see that turning into the enemy was far worse than merely letting a point on a holomap change color. To lose their way was to lose the ultimate objective. But though Sharp appeared to be moved, telling his men to help with the burials, this was just to shorten the delay. Back at the base, Ventress is lopping off clone heads to get the captain to give up Plo and Kit's location. The man pleads with her to respect the convention of civilized systems, but she just presses her saber to Ozzel's neck. The heat burning his skin makes it easy to ignore Wolffe's attempt at instilling some honor, telling him not to give up their brothers, but the man squeals out that they were on their way to the Climate Control Center. Her arm swings back as she says the reward will be a quick death, only for Warlord Gout to stop her by saying they can be used as slaves, or at the very least as food for slaves. The team at the station was alerted that a strike force is en route, and Plo can sense the thoughts racing through the enemy, so he opts to ditch the speeders and climb the last leg of the path, a route they would not expect. But they'd still be a half-day hike to get there, and it seemed like they were intensifying the storm around the station, providing the perfect cover for Ventress's ambush. Plo tells her she stands no chance against two masters, but she uses the force to cause an avalanche that consumes everyone but her. In their temporary holding cell, Wolffe and the boys are working to hotwire the security gate controls while calling out Ozzel for being a coward. He screams that he is still their superior, but Wolffe ignores him and leads the breakout. Back on the mountain, the strike team pops out of the snow and scrap the nearest droids. Plo explaining to the troops that they used a force bubble to save them, but he had broken his left arm in the process, keeping the jokes going by blaming it on the passing of ages. Sharp says they lost 4 of their men, but is most upset that they lost the explosives, and says that the Jedi should have just stayed on offense and destroyed the enemy instead of focusing on protecting them. While they debate if a clone is a weapon or a person, Kit jumps in to say that the Jedi's philosophical side and their want to save people from death will be what makes a difference in how this war ends. A prophetic statement, even if not in the way he hoped. Adaru puts an end to the talk with a call from his horn. Enormous woolly worms called Alids burst up, and the native explains that they can use these as transports, not riding on them, but inside of their mouths. As they try to cross the last miles, Wolffe's team was using an AAT to break free of the compound. Moments later, their beast delivered them just outside of the Weather Control Center, and Plo explains that since they did not have the explosives, they would have to take control and turn the hurricane force winds against itself. Sharp realizes that there was no plan to escape, and was surprised and impressed that the Jedi were truly not operating out of fear. He saw the Jedi were able to be compassionate, while Plo was calmly explaining that they would all die on this mission. Meanwhile, the clones were trying to explain to Ozzel that they couldn't follow the captain's orders to flee this world and abandon the strike team, no matter how much he screamed at them, since all of their ships and vehicles had been frozen solid or destroyed. Blaster bolts crack through the cold air and cut down several troopers, and Wolffe moves to protect the captain. At the same time, Plo's forces were taking fire as they sliced into the antenna feed, and he gives the order to bring it down on them. The Aqualish tech panics, but there is nothing they could do. In just seconds, a tornado spirals towards them, shredding the facility and raining down chunks of debris. The strike team desperately search for cover, as the Admiral in atmosphere doesn't miss a beat, giving the order to rush in at the first sign of the storm breaking up. As Ventress was slicing her way towards the clones, gunships and fighters destroy the entire tank column, as the assassin tells the few remaining forces to fall back. Light finally shines on the battlefront, and Wolffe cannot believe how ungrateful and shameless Ozzel is. He was praising himself, as the commander tried his best to stay calm and just contact his general. Plo reminds him that the mission is not finished. They must move to the Separatist base and repository for the Agrosite. Once they reach a lookout point, Plo warns that he senses the enemy still has some secret weapon at their disposal, and Kit notices that they are moving explosives into the mine. They realize that they will blow up the entire facility before letting it fall, killing all the corpsmen inside. Knowing that they needed to strike with speed and violence, he defers command to Sharp, saying they would do it his way, and wanted to warn Ozzel not to strike until the hostages were free. But their long-range comms were being blocked. Wolffe and the clones know that their victory was not as easy as it seemed, that Ventress was planning something, but they obey their orders and charge into the facility. As Plo's team climbs towards the mine, he reminds the Devil Dogs that this is a mission of compassion, not destruction. In his wisdom, the Jedi wanted Sharp to feel what it was like to save people. Letting him take charge would help the clone identify himself with this compassionate act. They needed to hurry because minutes later, the roar of Republic craft was echoing through the mountain range, and laser cannon fire rolled over the outer defenses. Then massive, purple beams of Agrosite-powered cannons opened fire on the acclimators overhead. taking out the assault ships with a single hit. Ozzel again is about to lay bantha tracks in his pants, shouting to bomb the cannons, but Wolffe simply says that the target is too hardened. So now what are the orders? The arrogant friend of Palpatine is speechless, and more acclamators are turned into fireballs. Plo sees that he must adapt the plan, and does allow Sharp to be on the demo team, sending him with Kit to go into the cannons, while he led the rest down into the mines. As he and Ataru run through the shadowed corridors, he picks up on the dark side just a split second before crimson sabers slash towards his head. They crash against his blue blade, and he orders the team to continue on as he held the assassin back. She notices his broken arm and taunts the master, before using her martial arts to deliver powerful kicks. He absorbs many before flinging her back with a force push while rebuking her cynical philosophy. Kit Fisto was using a force-assisted jump to get into the barrel of the Agrosite cannon, pulling up Sharp with him, and went to work slicing through the droid crew. This worked to draw away the droids guarding the slaves. While the rest of the Devil Dogs were helping to free the natives, their leader was making sure these capital ship-killing guns were taken out. Kit had moved the Agrosite charge near the other cannons, and before he knew what the clone was doing, Sharp was on top of it and told the general to run, that he was going out like a devil dog, using his blaster as a firing pin to cause a chain reaction that blew off the top of the mountain, completely eliminating this threat and taking the warlord down with him, while Kit leapt to safety, landing near the mine entrance. With one arm and an improvised sleeve, Master Plo was still able to send one of Ventress's blades flying, but in her fury, she beats him back and thinks she has him pinned, bragging that with the press of a button, she will kill all the Kormai and deny the Republic their precious ore. He showed he was not exhausted and weak. With a wave of his hand, the detonator fell to the level below, and a bolt strikes it just before she can pick it back up. This time it was Wolffe doing the taunting, and Fisto closes in on her, demanding she give up. Her eyes widen with madness, and in an instant she flashes past Wolffe, slashing him as she made her escape. The blow shattered his helmet into pieces, the blade vaporizing through skin, bone, and eye. Plo rushes to his friend's side as the clone dropped to his knees in pain. Later that evening, Plo explains to Fisto that he knows they could have tried to pursue Ventress, but that taking care of the wounded in this battle was more important. And they attend the holo call with the Supreme Chancellor, who is thanking Captain Ozzel for his heroic leadership under heavy enemy fire, that he will be rewarded with a flagship and fighter group, while everyone did their best to hide their disgust. Plo, Kit, and Wolffe then go to say their goodbyes to Ataru, and to settle the question raised before this whole mission went sideways. How old is Plo Koon? The Master says if he must know, he is 382 years old in Kel Dor years, begging the question how that relates to the Galactic Standard, but Plo walks off saying they will have time to figure that out. Kit laughing at how much of a prankster the old stoic was, because according to every biologist across Coruscant, the average Kel Dor lifespan is only around 70 standard years. And from this frozen battlefront, Plo is quickly off to Felucia.
Warthog, protect the gunships. I will take out the fighters.
They would provide the air support for Kenobi and Anakin's forces working through the thick jungles in ATTEs and Juggernauts.
Come around and I'll try to get them off your tail.
Little Ahsoka was exhibiting the worst case yet of her disregard for orders, to the point of why these two were paired. Anakin could see what it looked like when one acted from only their limited point of view.
They're about to overrun you, Ahsoka. You just can't see it. Now follow orders and get in the ship.
After they successfully make it back to Coruscant, Plo would be there in person to decide her punishment for disobeying direct orders. Later we see Plo appearing on a hologram to view the message sent directly by General Grievous.
I do not care about your republic. I only live to see you die.
And while the Jedi were recoiling from this blow, Wolffe steps into view, and though he was down an eye, with the scar from Ventress's blade still fresh on his face, he sees something everyone else missed.
Commander Wolffe has found a message in the holotransmission. Play back the message.
Without this clue, Eth Koth would have surely suffered a long and painful death, but a strike team led by Gallia, Kenobi, and Skywalker were able to bring the Master home. Later this year, the young Boba Fett would launch his plan to get revenge on Mace Windu for killing his father. At just 11 years old, he worked with his dad's old allies, Bosk and Aurra Sing, to sneak into the Jedi's Venator, bomb Windu's quarters, and when this didn't work, take down the entire ship. To make sure he got his revenge, he hoped a trap placed in the wreckage would do the trick. Though searching through the wreckage proved too dangerous to confirm the kill, he thought he tracked Windu escaping, but it was R2 who was desperately trying to make it back to Coruscant, evading Fett's Slave 1. Moments later would tumble into Plo's mission briefing.
This ship prevent Grievous from... R2, deliver the message you so obviously need to communicate.
Ahsoka helps R2 share her master's recording, and Plo doesn't waste a second.
Prepare my ship. We shall leave immediately.
Fuel and weapon systems were catching fire and exploding the downed Venator, and they were only a few minutes from death when the Wolffe pack flew into position via LA-ATs. Wolffe and the boys would cable over and rescue the Jedi, while the entire bridge was being held up through Plo and Ahsoka's power. While Masters Windu and Skywalker were recovering, Plo visits them and has to share some bad news.
They apparently took hostages.
Mace Windu, you were lucky to escape.
That was pawns.
Because Anakin is in no condition to jump back into the fight, and Windu's past with the boy will be a problem, Plo says that he will hunt them down. This mission would be an opportunity to depart much wisdom on little Ahsoka, and he warns her that they were going down into the more dangerous, lower levels of Coruscant.
We must go to the lower levels. The underworld.
Seeing no point in going to Boba's last known location, as that was the only place they could be sure he would not be. Instead, they would go into crime dens and try and gain intel or find an associate of Fett's. But to follow his lead this time.
This is the 5th scumbucket drinking hole we've been to.
And this time, try to be more subtle. You have adopted many of your master's ways, including a lack of subtlety.
And even explains how vices can be a Jedi's ally.
You may be surprised what people reveal when they have been drinking.
In the cantina, Plo makes it known to the bartender that he was a Jedi, while Ahsoka fades into the crowd and calms herself in the Force to eavesdrop in on the conversation swirling around her. Eventually, she hears a man talking of an associate on Florum that was killed by Aurra Sing. Before she learns more, they detect her, and a dozen weapons spring out of cloaks and holsters, only for the blue saber to ignite as Plo moved to her side. Warning them not to try it, the Padawan tosses credits to distract the crowd, and they slip away. Plo just thought she couldn't contain herself again, but is so proud to hear what she picked up.
Well done, little Ahsoka. We're off to Flora.
Before the next rotation, a T-6 shuttle was making its descent into Hondo Ohnaka's pirate camp. With hushed voices, Hondo explains that he had nothing to do with this, and warns him of the trap.
They're waiting inside the bar. I have no idea what she has planned for you.
As soon as Plo takes a seat, Boba rushes out of the shadows with his dad's Westar 34 in hand. Even with the blaster pressed to the back of his head, Plo is unshaken and talking to her like he was the one with power here.
We can do this the difficult way or the simple way. The choice is yours.
Aurra tried to stay tough, but Ahsoka leaps out and severs Sing's antenna and puts Saber to throat. The Jedi plead for a peaceful resolution, only for Aurra to give a sign to the boy. He shoots at Ahsoka, giving her a chance to push the saber back and pull her pistols, while Plo had sensed the boot firing projectiles, slamming the table down to intercept before sending it into the path of the rapid blaster fire. In a blink, Plo's blade destroys her pistols and gets her to surrender. Never losing a second, he is asking for the location of the prisoners as he backs her up to the wall, but the young Fett deploys a small explosive, which was just large enough to force everyone to scramble. The boy tries to follow after her, but the master easily force pulls him back, and he cried out to his adoptive mother. She callously turns away and saves herself. Again, Plo is immediately asking for help in saving the men.
If you do not tell us where those men are, they are going to die.
As a great father figure in the temple, he recognizes that in the underworld, Hondo could step into this role, citing his relationship with Jango to get through to the boy.
It is the honorable thing to do. It's what your father would have wanted.
Seconds later, he is able to contact Ahsoka with the coordinates, realizing that Sing was leading her in the opposite direction. Her speeder opens fire on Bossk, knocking him to the ground as she slices the hostages free. Admiral Killian holds the rifle on the Trandoshan, while Sing finally caught up with them, crashing into the speeder and making her way into Slave 1. Little Ahsoka proved as brave and tenacious as her master, leaping onto the craft and slicing off a wing before moving to the cockpit, forcing a crash landing as the Padawan is hit with remorse and sadness, seeing the fiery explosion and believing that she had just taken a life. They could call that rescue mission a success, but now moving into 20 BBY, a mysterious new threat was killing Jedi across the galaxy. Plo would be a part of the team that took over custody of the bodies from Delta Squad.
Not everything is what it seems. There may be a new threat. Someone or something has eluded us. Perhaps a newly appointed Sith Lord.
But Kenobi recognizes that the wounds do not have the markings of a saber or the precision of one who took pride in the Sith martial arts. They seem to have been torn apart by a beast. They did not yet know about Dooku's new apprentice, Savage Opress, and that this demon would haunt them over the following year. And they learned that Master Peel had been captured and was being held at the Citadel on Lola Seiyu. Plo leads the briefing, starting with the site itself.
As you are aware, the Citadel is their most isolated and impenetrable detention facility. No one has ever escaped.
Going on to explain that they can't even get close enough to gain intel, and why this mission was so important.
He obtained the coordinates of a secret hyperspace lane known as the Nexus Route, which travels into the heart of both the Republic and Separatist homeworlds.
In a war with hyperdrive tech, the only thing that prevented the enemy from what would feel like teleporting from one part of the galaxy to the other, right over your homeworld, was the restriction of hyperspace lanes. If the CIS got access to the Nexus route, they could go from deep in CIS territory and pop out over Coruscant. Knowing the fate of the entire war was riding on this mission, Ahsoka assumes she is coming.
You two have much to discuss.
He tells her this was an Old Republic creation that was intended to keep Jedi prisoners should they ever lose their way. It was too dangerous for any Padawan. As the rest were preparing, she goes to talk to Uncle Plo, confiding in him while he cleans the blade of Doran that Anakin was holding her back out of fear of losing her, and she felt that she should be the one that was able to risk her own life. He agrees and makes sure that her path is clear so she could choose her own fate, to become frozen in carbonite after the rest of the strike force was already sealed away. He then oversees the loading of the crew and takeoff, praying that the Force be with them on this most dangerous mission of the Clone Wars. Just like years earlier, Anakin's old trick worked and they were able to pass through the lifeform scanner, and once thawed out, Anakin explains in a way that would have made Plo proud, showing that the Council's pairing worked perfectly, that Skywalker was getting his taste of a rebellious Padawan, while still making sure Ahsoka's clever and brave spirit was not eclipsed by Anakin's fears.
If there's one thing I've learned from you, Master, it's that following direct orders isn't always the best way to solve a problem.
All while the Council was forced to wait in darkness, going several hours before any status update. Plo is quick to bring the other Masters in and explains that their forces were being separated, but had freed even Peel, and were now making their way to evac. But on the landing pad, disaster would strike. The transport was hit by laser cannon fire, causing an explosion that consumed Echo and sent shrapnel everywhere, forcing them to make a hasty retreat. As they sprint through the cave systems, they update the Council and are told that a fleet would be sent to rescue them. Plo was already en route when they were called back for an update on the landing zone.
Your rendezvous point will be this island.
As the Venators appear, they see the Lucrehulk and 6 Providence-class dreadnoughts making up the blockade. There is a calm before the storm as fighter squadrons are deployed, and for this crucial mission, the Delta 7s are being led by Saesee Tiin, while Plo would ride with the gunships, coordinating all their forces.
There have not been battles like these since the days of the Old Republic.
Indeed. Good hunting.
The incoming fire is so intense that Tiin recommends peeling back and trying again, but Plo orders them to continue. The time was running out as the strike team was being overwhelmed. The never-shaken Kel Dor greets them with a joke in the face of near certain death.
I believe you've worn out. You're welcome.
And with fighter escort, they make it back to the ship. Plo coordinating with Admiral Coburn to make sure the timing was perfect, turning to use the aft of the lead ship as cover as they set down in the Venator's hangar before disappearing into the void.
Of Master Peel's loss, we are sorry to hear.
Because of his great sacrifice, we now have the Nexus route coordinates.
And we see a flash of the growing struggle between the Supreme Chancellor and Jedi Order, as Peel told Ahsoka to only tell her half of the coordinates to the Jedi, while Tarkin would only tell his half to Palpatine. Yoda moves to join the Army Man and ensure that the Nexus point was recorded, and that Master Peel did not die in vain. Before they retire to their chambers, Anakin asks Plo if he really told Ahsoka that she could go on this mission, and his response was true from a certain point of view.
It appears I did.
Before walking off with the mischievous little one. Immediately after this, Ahsoka would get an attempt at redemption on Felucia. This time, instead of being separated and disobedient to her master, she was side by side with him leading the assault towards an important Separatist base. Once they took the hill overlooking the target, Plo explains the next steps.
I'll take the left flank. Skywalker attack the front gate. Ahsoka, you scale the back wall. We'll meet in the middle.
Anakin would be at the 501st while Ahsoka was with the boys from the 104th, and as soon as he was in position, he checked to make sure everyone was ready, then gave the orders from the ATTEs to unleash their mass driver cannons, raining down artillery fire. This made the threat seem far off in the mountain range, and splitting them up made it so the Separatists were being hit from 4 different angles. Anakin's team waited for the droid units to file out of the front gate, springing on them once they were far enough out, which was Plo's sign to get over the sidewall, using the Force while the Wolfpack rocketed up on jetpacks. As soon as the droid sentries engaged him, Ahsoka moved right on cue and provided cover while the clones used grapple cables to storm their side. But she sensed there was some threat watching them in the jungle. Instead of ignoring it and focusing on the mission, her curiosity led her into the electroweb trap of a Trandoshan exotic game hunter. These three teams close in on their droid units, with Plo using sabers and force blows to work through the B-1s and dwarf spider droids. The plan had worked perfectly, but Anakin sees that his Padawan is not there with them. He desperately gives orders to fan out and search the jungle, as Ahsoka is trying to stay alive and hiding out with others being brought to the moon of Trandosha. Anakin had stayed up all throughout the night, ordering more and more searches and trying to pick up on her presence in the Force. The following morning, Plo moves to console Anakin to explain that all of their intelligence agencies, both within the Jedi Order and Republic military, were diligently searching for any sign of her, but that the time had come for them to leave Felucia without her.
Your emotions are clouding your judgment.
I will not leave her fate up to others.
It's time to go.
The combination of genuine passion and effort, with the slightest raising of his voice as he sternly repeated his orders, to walking away to show that this was not a debate, all demonstrate how he was a master of calm and effective leadership, as getting Anakin to leave without Ahsoka would be one of the most difficult tasks in the entire galaxy. But the Chosen One also knew that Plo cared deeply for her as well. Days would pass with not even a clue to her whereabouts anywhere in the galaxy, but by now Ahsoka had already been helping the survivors change their strategy from hiding to fighting, even killing the lead Trandoshan son during what was supposed to be a proud moment as he completed this hunting rite of passage. In the Jedi Temple, Plo tries to get Anakin to realize that this was a lesson from the Force, which would test the lessons the Master had been trying to instill in his Padawan, that while Ahsoka's abilities were being tested, it would be Anakin's belief in little Ahsoka that was under scrutiny. There was nothing he could do, no problem to solve.
Whatever you're trying to say, Master Plo, just say it.
I am suggesting that perhaps, if you have trained her well, she shall take care of herself.
Nearly a week would pass before they finally received word from a Wookiee strike team that Ahsoka was safely on her way back to Coruscant. They still needed to be filled in on the details of how she led the others in flipping this most dangerous game on their hunters, all without any intervention from the Grand Army or the Jedi Order. And yet the Padawan was safely back home.
It is good to see you safe, little Ahsoka.
He turns to let Master and Padawan have their reunion. Plo, Mace, and Yoda are standing close enough to eavesdrop.
All I had was your training, and the lessons you taught me. Thank you, Master.
They all see this as them both passing this lesson issued by the Force itself, and it was evident that the Chosen One was able to control his passions, to not use his will to try and dominate the natural will of the Force. An excellent sign that Anakin would be strong enough to resist the path of the dark side. Later this year, Adi Gallia would be captured by Grievous, and Plo led the rescue mission with a fleet of 5 Venators, ensuring that the Providence could not escape. And he was leading the pack charging through the corridor, with Wolffe leading a smaller team directly to Gallia's location.
Thanks for the rescue, Master Plo!
What nobody expected was to run into Padme's droids. Their misadventure saw them going from pirates to space to separatist ships, all just to cross paths with Plo's forces in the middle of this high-risk rescue mission. And always the deadpan Joker, he sicks the talkative droid on his old friend.
Well, I'm certain Wolffe would love to hear about it.
Actually, sir.
Excellent.
It wasn't long after this that the High Council would learn that the Togruta colony on Kyros was captured by the Separatists. Kenobi and Skywalker's forces were dispatched to eliminate the droid forces there, but they realized this was an operation led by the Zygerians. The ancient slavers, hoping that an alliance with Dooku could help them win the war and re-establish the galactic slave markets. After trying to infiltrate their homeworld Zygeria, all would be captured, but Anakin and Ahsoka were able to escape and get a message back to the Council. Anakin located Rex and his master, and gave the all-clear to Plo to send in the pack.
Wolffe leader to Wolffe pack. Accelerate to attack speed.
This is Warthog. We're going in.
Blade of Doran easily flies circles around the large turbolaser cannon defenses, but he is unable to cut them down due to their ray shielding. The Zygerian fighter craft deploy and were about to shoot down the Z-95 headhunters, but Plo had to show why he was considered one of the best pilots in the Order.
All 7, cut the engines.
And we see how he is utterly efficient with everything he does during combat, not wasting a second celebrating.
That got him. Good work, General.
Keep your focus, Warthog. Watch out for those towers.
All this time, Kenobi and Rex are trying to break free, and the Slave Master destroys the control panel that was needed to reverse the purge process that was about to drop the Togruta to their deaths in the pit. Plo is trying his best to break through the ray shield, but the light cannons on his nimble Delta 7 weren't strong enough.
I cannot move the cruiser in for the rescue operation until those enemy cannons are destroyed.
Anakin says he will try to turn their weapons against them, and Ahsoka comes up with a plan to have Admiral Coburn move the Arquitans into position. With Anakin taking control of the turbo lasers, opening fire on the other towers, allowing the cruiser to make its descent. And with the help of the jetpacks, cables, and the Force, the Togruta were all saved. Then Plo gives the word to purge this wretched facility, sending it into the pit.
All gunships, fire!
Once they are safely away through hyperspace, the Jedi reunite and go to speak with the leader of the colonists. And they are all proud of the Padawan's progress and quick thinking to save her people's lives.
Ahsoka is the real hero. Without her creativity, I don't think we would have gotten your people to safety.
The joy of this victory was quick to be replaced with the dread of a returning Sith Lord. The one thing the Council was certain of concerning the Phantom Menace that revealed itself 12 years earlier was that at least one of those Sith was dead. Yet the Council was now listening to the threat issued from Darth Maul, demanding that Kenobi come out to face him alone on the Outer Rim world of Raydonia. To make sure they took him seriously, the Zabrak executes an entire village, promising to do much worse. Plo agreed with Windu that this was an ambush, but the Force was telling Yoda to still send Kenobi, that an unlikely ally would appear. Maul's long-awaited revenge was not to be fought on fair ground. Maul had been attacked 2-on-1 back on Naboo. Now that beast that had been slaughtering Jedi, Dooku's new assassin, stepped forth. Now the odds were in his favor, and their combined strength were able to beat Kenobi unconscious. But the Force was always right. Ventress intervened not on behalf of Kenobi, but out of a mutual hatred of the Sith after she had been betrayed by Dooku. After one of the most intense saber battles of the entire war, Obi and Asajj narrowly get away via escape pod. Maul lets them live, hoping this will trick the Order into the next stages of his revival. At a nearby spaceport, Kenobi calls Cody for backup, and then the commander sees Ventress walking away. The general gives orders not to pursue, sensing that she may yet come back to the light. When he updates the Council, Windu is pressing to create a specialized task force to hunt down the Zabrak immediately. Plo's suggestion is to add Master Bru Junfan, considered to be the greatest Force combat wielder in the galaxy. His next move would be to contact his informants in the Coruscant underworld, and 2 days later they had tracked him down to a remote ice world, finding the ship abandoned, the dead bodies inside, and the obvious signs of lightsaber combat throughout. The strike team moves to search a nearby cantina and find everybody inside had been beaten or sliced to death. Plo notices the mark of the Scourge, a powerful gang in the Outer Rim, and Master Junfan sees there is a cave nearby. But Plo notes that there is a vast maze of caves. In one of them, Maul was explaining to his brother that it was time that they create their own faction, one that took advantage of the chaos created by the larger powers of the Republic and CIS. As they further explore the cave base, the Zabrak find a woman in the prison cells that claimed to be royalty sold off to the thugs by her own brother, which he did in order to block her claim to the throne. Just then they get an alert from the proximity sensor and see the strike team rapidly approaching. The Jedi tell their units to stay back and make sure nobody escapes, and as they storm the command center, Plo yells to release the woman and surrender. But with the press of a button, Wampus comes storming into the room, killing the nearest troopers and making an opening for the brothers to escape with their hostage. The martial artist was pounding away, while the Red Blades were dismembering the second squad. Maul knows they only have seconds to escape, and the Wampas catch up to Kenobi, while Plo and Junfan are surrounded. Plo tries to keep the troops' minds on the objective, to target the ship. Before they can board, Master Grotto steps up to cut him off, but is himself cut down when Maul's tactic of using the woman as a human shield stops the Jedi, only to take a blade through the abdomen. Kenobi had been force choked, and like all his missions before, Plo stops to take care of his allies instead of pursuing the enemy. The brothers do escape, and while the Padawan is still being consoled, Plo is already on to the next step, showing that the Kel Dor actually have excellent eyesight even behind the goggles, for he had seen a small item dropped by the captured woman. He hands it to Junfan so he can use his telemetry skills, a unique trait that, like Quinlan Vos and Cal Kestis, allows them to sense the item's past. He gets glimpses he can recognize as the planet Pleam's Nexus. Plo moves to Kenobi's side to tell him to sit this part out and let him finish the fight while he recovers. Obi-Wan agreed, but asks that he takes reinforcements. The call was made to Anakin, and the wounded were transferred to their command ship before heading out to this strange world. When the sister returns with her black-robed escorts, the traitorous brother plays it cool for as long as he could, before Maul calls out the coward, slaughtering him, then the guards, and even the woman's beloved hound. She does respect her part of the deal and gives up the brothers access to the family vaults. Dozens of crates full of gold bars and treasures are loaded up, and Maul says this will help fund the creation of their criminal empire. But as they race out to their ship, they are stopped by the strike team. Master Solok takes a metal leg to the face while Junfan is blocking. Plo rushes forward to push him back as a force blast by Savage sent troops flying off the landing pad. Plo moves to the Yellow Beast while the Red Demon threw his saber at the martial artist, who easily dodged it, only to see that it was intended for Solok. Plo takes a kick to the face. The young master goes into a frenzy, locking up the Sith and trying to pin him, while even more clones are killed. The sheer strength of the Night Sisters' creations was overwhelming Plo. Maul delivered his clawed foot into the chest of the human, and the leader of this team had been beaten, dropping down as Savage ripped off his mask. The Type 1 atmosphere needed for most species was rapidly killing the Kel Dor, burning away the soft tissue in his nose, mouth, and down into his throat. Not just suffocating from the lack of Doran air, but actively being attacked by this air. Savage indulges in the Jedi's pain, waiting for some time as Plo fought for his life. Just as the red blade was about to come down upon him, laser cannon fire rained down from above. Sensing that it was Kenobi, Maul is now the brother that needs to be restrained, and Savage is able to get them back to their ship in time to escape. Anakin and Kenobi go to deliver first aid, getting Plo's mask back on, and they see that Junfan is mortally wounded. His last words are to his friend, saying this is one mystery he will explore before Plo. The Master wishes him a safe journey, and they all can sense he had become one with the Force. From here, Plo would be off to Foros to push back the CIS invasion of this odd and ancient world. He brought with him Padawans Ahsoka and her close friend Barriss Offee. Plo trusted them to carry out their own mission, which led them to discover an underworld full of the tiny Ru people, worshipping in their hidden temple, praying for an end to the fighting above. They are able to convince the Ru to come with them for safe passage off-world, only for their transport to be shot down, killing all the Ru on board. As Ahsoka helps her friend out of the wreckage, Barriss is in tears thinking about how the Jedi's war had brought destruction to so many planets across the galaxy. Dooku himself being just another Jedi after all. Ahsoka tells her not to let into her feelings of anger, fear, and hate. But she asks, what about guilt? The great telepathic ability of Master Plo must have picked up on these feelings, and knew that she wasn't the only one with this sentiment. One of the greatest archivists in the history of the Order, a fellow Kel Dor named Jedi Master Nos Doral, made sure to preserve the history of the Jedi and origins of the division that led to the Sith, and the empires that waged wars for thousands of years during the Old Republic era. Master Pong Krell shocked the Order with his treason during the Battle of Umbara, but this was just the latest in the history of the Jedi's existence that had been convinced by a time of war that the Jedi were too weak to defeat evil, and their supposed ethics only resulted in longer wars, more suffering, and never a complete eradication of darkness. Plo would wonder how many Jedi would fall down this corrupted line of thinking, the wish to use the dark side to do good, and the delusion of the benevolent dictator that had corrupted the greatest in their order, from Revan up through Dooku, and was flaring up in the Padawans of this era, and even the Chosen One himself. Perhaps to ensure that he could get a feel for Ahsoka's feelings towards the war and the Jedi Order, he has Barriss sent back to Coruscant, but takes forces with Tano to the dug world of Malastare. Republic intelligence had reported a small group of separatists carrying out some clandestine project on this planet, using heavily cloaked commandos to secure something of value. They suspected that their goal was to weaponize the Zillo Beast. Plo tells Ahsoka to imagine the damage a pack of these could do to Coruscant if the enemy was able to find another sample and clone them. As they walk through the thick jungle, they lose contact with some of the men and find them dead and wrapped up in the vines. Plo warns them that this is not droid handiwork, but another threat lurks out here in the moonlit night. As they near a clearing, they see a massive Zillo Beast statue crafted from the metal of a scrapped droid command ship that was leading the operations in the uncharted part of the jungle. The Dug tribe that did this spots the strike team and seems to not understand Galactic Basic. Plo thinks they were one of the uncontacted tribes, and they were simply trying to defend their native lands. Ahsoka points out that their weapons were tipped with Zillo Beast's teeth, saying that they had no choice but to fight back. While Plo retorts, there is always a choice, Padawan. Still your mind and you will see it. Then she thinks to search through the scrap sculpture for the ship's engine, and with the touch of a lightsaber, the entire thing explodes, cracking the earth, and as she fell into the cavern, Plo grabs hold of her just in time, bringing her up to safety, only to see that a massive droid force had moved in on them. The Dugs were dead, but now they were trapped. As the droids calculate how to take them in alive, the comms officer is able to contact Anakin. He and Kenobi were currently being chased by Cad Bane, taking heavy fire in their Charger C-70, but despite his master's worries, Anakin is able to get their hyperdrive back online, and are able to make a rapid descent through the Malastare atmosphere, expecting to see a massive battle, but finding only heaps of scrapped droids. Kenobi asks what happened, and Plo only gives a sly response that being outgunned never stopped them before. Of course, he could never be sure what lay in the future for any Jedi, and what darkness lurked in their hearts. But fighting alongside her in such an intense battle, he did feel that little Ahsoka was still walking in the light. But it would be the High Council that would make the next move into darkness, developing their most controversial plan to date, to fake the death of Obi-Wan Kenobi and impersonate the assassin Moralo Eval, a man believed to be the mastermind behind a credible plot against the Supreme Chancellor. Only the High Council was aware of this, and they would have to lie to the entire Order, Republic officials, and the public about the death of this famed hero of the Clone Wars. Deception at this level was hard to justify, but this late in the war, with billions killed, and with threats that could easily force a Republic surrender being picked up by both military and Jedi intelligence networks, they felt this was the only option they had. Anakin Skywalker would be pushed closer to the dark side than ever before, and his Padawan was concerned.
I'm worried about Anakin. He hasn't said a word since it happened.
Plo doesn't say a word, likely finding it hard to lie to little Ahsoka, knowing she loved Kenobi as well. Eventually, Skywalker would track down what he thought to be the assassin, only to sense his master was alive, and Yoda would bring him in on the plan. Wasn't long before Ahsoka was told as well, and they would all play a part in foiling the greatest attempt on Palpatine's life since the war started. If it wasn't for Kenobi being undercover, they all felt the Supreme Chancellor would have been captured or killed. And when the dust settled and they were back on Coruscant, the meditations would probe the question of the efficacy of deception and doing good. But was this just a trick of the dark side? Years ago, he warned clones that evil didn't care what name you called yourself. It didn't care if the rulers of the galaxy were Republic or Separatist. The dark side just wanted to be embodied in the actions of as many people as possible. Plo wondered if this thought had infected the High Council. And a few weeks later, the concern of a growing darkness manifested itself in one of the worst ways imaginable.
Bombed the temple hangar, someone has. Your assistance to find the terrorist. We need.
Since Anakin and Ahsoka were two of the most trusted Jedi that were also off-world during the bombing, they were chosen to be the neutral investigators alongside the crime scene analysis droid Russo. And Ahsoka was not seeing the darker accusation Windu was hinting at.
Everything is on the table. We have to look at the possibility that it could have been anyone in the temple, even a Jedi.
Their investigation reveals that nanodroids were used in the bombing, and they think that they had a prime suspect. Jakar, a man that was responsible for managing the explosive ordnance that was stored and loaded in the temple hangar. When they report their findings that evening, Mace explains that the Republic investigators will be getting involved since the attack killed civilians and clones working in the hangar. When Russo realizes that the nanodroids were in Jakar's body, that he was the bomb, they head out to his home to see if they could find more info, and it is revealed that his wife Letta was behind it. The report also cleared any Jedi involvement, but Windu and Ahsoka are both more troubled by the fact that it wasn't that unreasonable to think another Jedi could have fallen, and that public resistance to the war was bubbling up to the point of terrorist attacks in these hallowed halls. But for now, they had to prepare for the funeral.
Luminous beings are we, but temporary vessels, our bodies are.
After the burial, Plo is with Mace and Yoda talking to Chancellor Palpatine, while Ahsoka learns that Letta had been moved to Republic custody. Shortly after this, Tarkin informs the Council that Letta will only speak with Ahsoka Tano. They're all confused by this, but she wanted to do whatever she could to help the investigation. Commander Fox watches the cams as the Padawan apparently used the Force to strangle the prisoner. With blasters drawn, the clones rush in, finding Letta dead and taking Tano into custody.
Can't say I blame you, Commander Tano, but all the same, you're under arrest.
It wasn't long before Tarkin showed up to interrogate the girl that, to him, symbolized everything wrong with the Jedi Order being meshed with the leaders of the military. The fact that a young, reckless, alien girl like this outranked him was outrageous. Anakin was being held up at the main gate, furiously demanding that he be able to see his Padawan, no matter what orders Tarkin gave against accepting visitors. He returns with Rex to help sway the commander, and as they arrive, they hear comm chatter that Ahsoka had escaped, and several clones were killed in the process.
She's killed troopers! I know, Commander Tano. She would never do something like this.
Anakin demanded that they do not shoot to kill, and they spread out to make sure she can't get off the grounds of the Naval HQ. Blaster fire erupted near the First Battle Memorial, and Anakin reiterates that their weapons better be set to stun. They nearly trap her at the refinery, and Anakin does catch up to her in the sewers, but she did not believe even her master could save her from what she claimed to be a grand conspiracy to frame her. The storm that raged outside mirrored the emotions swirling in the minds of all in the High Council chamber. Tarkin spun a story of how Ahsoka must have used mind tricks on the guards before killing them, and while it was the only obvious way to explain the evidence, many were still unconvinced.
I do not believe that Ahsoka could have fallen so far.
The choice of who would be best to track her down was obvious.
Master Skywalker and Master Plo Koon. With clones, you will go.
But Mace worries that Anakin will not be able to act objectively. Obi-Wan and Yoda push that despite this, Anakin both knows her best and would be most able to convince her to turn herself in. The LAAT-LE gunships were loaded with Commanders Wolffe and Rex, along with 2 squads of the Coruscant Guard. The all-points bulletin issued to the lower-level authorities was spread out to every corner, and the now bounty hunter, Ventress, was eager to cash in on this, pouncing on her prey and putting her blade to the Togruta's throat. She explains that she will sell the bounty off to a broker so that they can turn her in, knowing that Ventress wouldn't be able to turn herself in without also being arrested. Tano says that they should make a deal, that there is a larger plot behind this, one that must involve Dooku's new apprentice, Ventress's replacement, and so if she helps Ahsoka figure out the real Jedi behind this, she could foil Dooku's plans and earn herself a pardon. But as they discuss this on the landing pad, Plo sees for himself that the fugitive Padawan was with the Sith assassin, one very capable of orchestrating the temple attack, murder of Letta, and prison break. As Anakin runs out to meet them, it seems like they were a pair, Ventress even placing a comforting hand on her shoulder before they run away. The probes track them down, and Wolffe's squad ambush them and plead with her to come in alive. Ventress takes initiative and slices through their blasters and leaves others unconscious. Ahsoka takes the other half, but they make sure they kill no one. As Wolffe recovers, he relays this to the generals, and it all seems to prove Tarkin's theory. They would be lost for a few hours, but they scramble to an old warehouse where the local police reported a massive explosion. When they arrive, Commander Wolffe doesn't say a word. He immediately fires a stun bolt to take her down. And as Anakin runs to her side, the commander notices the crates were full of the same nanodroids used in the bombing. She was put in cuffs and placed in the gunship, now with just Rex, Wolffe, Anakin, and Plo. All her close friends, who had fought side by side with her for years, seen her bravery and compassion firsthand. When they make the call back to the council, Plo explains that she was detained in a warehouse full of explosives, and while Anakin sensed that there was something more to this, even he knew this looked bad, and Plo calls on all his strength to remain neutral.
I think there's more going on than we know.
By Ahsoka or against her?
That remains to be seen.
The following morning, Tarkin explains that the Chancellor is worried that an internal procedure within the Jedi Order will not seem objective in the eyes of the public. She should be exiled from the Order so that she can be tried in the military tribunal with the charge of sedition against the Republic. Yoda decides that they will conduct their own trial first, and Plo is one of the judges, with his focus being on the question of the connection to Ventress.
Which brings us to Ventress. Can you explain your association with her?
He knew if there was anything in the galaxy that could corrupt a Jedi, it would be a Sith. Anakin snaps that this was just a show trial. They had already convicted her in their hearts. Plo was hurt to see him losing control, and compounding the sadness of this moment. Mace reads the guilty verdict, while Coyote Mundi strips her rank and explains how she will be transferred to the military. As Ahsoka was handed over to the military prisons, Anakin is able to hunt down Ventress and learns she made a call to Barriss Offee, who told her to meet in the warehouse. The High Council and many prominent senators would be witness to the military trial, hearing Tarkin's plea that a guilty verdict should come with the death penalty. As the trial goes on, Tarkin hammers on the point that she was associating with a Sith assassin war criminal. Meanwhile, Anakin had successfully pushed Barriss into drawing Ventress's stolen blades in order to escape. The fight would lead them all across the temple grounds, but he is able to take her prisoner, just in time to bring her before the trial to make a confession. The following hours were a mix of confusion, regret, relief, and bittersweet joy. We do not know how Plo voted during the Jedi trial. The fact that they were not in total agreement likely means that at least Plo and Obi-Wan were against her expulsion. Nonetheless, he knows that he did have his doubts and apologizes.
You have our most humble apologies, little Ahsoka. The Council was wrong to accuse you.
They all welcome her back to the Order and are eager to put this behind them, but this incident shook her to her core. Plo could see that she did not fall to the dark, but felt that the Jedi Order had strayed from the light. She was no longer little Ahsoka, and as she refuses her master's open hand and leaves the council chamber, Plo places an arm on Kenobi's shoulder, telling him not to run after his old Padawan, knowing that this moment needed to be between Anakin and his Padawan alone. Later, Anakin would confirm that she was not coming back, and the greatest mind reader in the galaxy would have sensed the great darkness rising in the Chosen One, and struggling to keep his tears in those stoic silver eyes. Months would pass, and Plo is charged with responding to a distress signal from the moon of Obadiah. A heavy sandstorm was shrouding the entire area, but eventually they find the wreckage of a T-6 Jedi shuttle, and inside, Plo picks up the long-lost saber of Sifo Dyas. The conversation in the High Council would lead them down a path that there was no coming back from.
The lightsaber of Sifo Dyas it is. Never found when he died, it was.
He said he foresaw great conflict, and that the Republic would need to raise an army. At the time, the Council rejected those ideas.
Guide the creation of the clones from the beginning. Dooku did. Our enemy created an army for us. Cover up this discovery. We must.
While they discuss the issue of the clone army creation, Plo notices Yoda is distracted, but what could be more pressing than this? Earlier that day, he had a profound experience with a voice that claimed to be Qui-Gon Jinn. Yoda speaks to Anakin about the conversation he had with what seemed to be the spirit of Qui-Gon, admitting he was not sure what to make of this. Later, he decided to tell the Council what he was struggling to understand.
Sense something that I have not before. Impossible it seems. Trust my feelings. I do not.
And to try and understand this mystery, Plo and the rest of the entire council placed their hands on Yoda for a group meditation that would last more than a day. But they heard nothing. Then they run a full battery of tests 3 times over, but find nothing physically wrong with Yoda. So Plo Koon arrives to help with the sensory deprivation procedure.
The chamber works to deprive the patient of any stimulation except from within. Master Yoda will be taken into an induced meditation. This allows the patient to go deeper than anything we can achieve by ourselves.
This technique was introduced to the Jedi Order by the ancient Kel Dor Jedi of the Old Republic. Just like the Baran Do sages back on Doran, the native Force worshippers of his people would go through long periods of sensory deprivation and then sensory overload, trying to maintain their focus on the Force in each setting. He did contact Qui-Gon again, but Master Jin told him to stop this artificial process and showed him where to go in the galaxy to learn the secret of surviving bodily death from a natural Force nexus. Anakin helps him escape, and the adventure would take him to Dagobah, then the Living Force Nexus, and off to Moraband, ending with a fight with Darth Sidious. But when he arrived back at the temple, he knew that the fate of the galaxy was, and always had been, in the hands of the Force itself, operating in a way that could not be articulated.
Afraid. Not much there is to say of my journey.
Plo Koon would not be brought in on the techniques of meditation that could help one retain their consciousness after bodily death. And though the Old Republic archivists like Master Nostaral surely recorded claims from both Jedi, Sith, and other Force traditions that all claimed to do this, it is not known to be a part of the Force cults back on his homeworld of Doran, and was only reintroduced via Qui-Gon, though time would show that no one was ever truly lost on the other side. In what would prove to be the final months of the Clone Wars, Plo was sitting with the Council viewing a transmission from Master Chubor, showing all of the refugee ships leaving Marraine being shot down by Separatist forces, killing the Jedi and thousands of innocent civilians.
For almost 3 standard years this war has raged,
said Plo Koon.
We can barely even count the numbers of the fallen. But this...
He shook his head.
He even pointed out the hypocrisy of the Order, the supposed peaceful meditative monks whose reputation was being completely replaced in the public as a branch of the military. The Force wasn't seen as some great mystery, but a great weapon used by one side, with the Separatists having plenty of valid claims to their side, and the Jedi understood that their army was gifted to them by the Sith Lord they had been fighting, one who had been a model Jedi for decades previously. The Jedi knew they were not morally perfect in this war, and Plo had lost what felt like a family member when Ahsoka walked away over similar issues. Tarkin and Anakin would have been vindicated hearing what Mace Windu said next.
Cut off the head, and the body will fall.
Assassination, mean you? To the dark side, such actions lead.
No one here wishes to behave like a Sith Lord.
Few do, at first.
This was a point Plo had been hearing since his days with the Devil Dogs. He was once concerned with always fighting in the honorable Jedi way, but as billions of innocent people died during these last months alone, during Operation Dirge's Lance, and now with the Outer Rim sieges purging entire worlds, now it seemed unethical to put anything above putting an end to the Sith threat. They suggested sending the unconventional underworld expert Quinlan Voss to work with Ventress in assassinating Count Dooku. She would get her revenge, enough credits to last a lifetime and a full pardon, ending the war and letting her define her future however she wanted. This mission was deep undercover, and months would pass without any update, until one day they see Kenobi escorting Ventress through the Jedi Temple to speak directly with the High Council. As soon as Plo saw her, his hand went to his blade, but Obi-Wan convinced them to listen to her story.
Did you teach Voss the ways of the Sith?
Asked Plo Koon.
Not as such.
They learned that Taurus was about to be attacked next. The irony of the Force on how it rhymed was not lost on them, being one of the most infamous attacks by Darth Malak thousands of years ago. A Jedi who fell to the dark side in a war that set the galaxy ablaze and killed billions of civilians in what was always at its core a civil war between Force wielders. As Kenobi helped Ventress track down and rendezvous with Voss, and the Master was convinced that Voss was only biding his time pretending to serve Dooku to gain his trust, he leaked useful intel and even found ways to work with Kenobi on some short missions destroying CIS assets, before returning to his role as an undercover agent. But some of these details were still suspicious, and eventually Kenobi agreed with Yoda and Mace that Voss had truly fallen to the dark side, becoming a double agent and working to bring about a Separatist victory. Plo and Ki-Adi-Mundi were called in for an emergency session of the Council, and there was a near unanimous decision to execute their fallen brother.
I think we need to seriously entertain the possibility of execution. Perhaps if Voss sees the Count again and has a chance to assassinate him, he'll be able to resist the dark side. He could redeem himself, come back from it. Isn't that what we really want? Or are we all just looking for sport?
That is untrue, and you know it, Master Kenobi,
chided Plo Koon.
This may have seemed uncharacteristically cold for Master Plo, but Kenobi would not have known about Plo Koon's own struggles with the call to forbidden powers, and that the Kel Dor had been able to completely master these feelings. He was a master of one of the rarest Force abilities of all, a light side power move called Electric Judgment. He first used this in a mission shortly after the death of his master, Tyvaka. His report would be sealed long before Kenobi became a master, but Windu, Yoda, and many of the others currently sitting on the council were in those same seats at the time, knowing his past and helping him keep this a secret. A secret that was only eventually revealed by Luke Skywalker when he was trying to restore the Jedi Order. Plo had been tracking a notorious criminal named Pommel, and the man was able to sense the Jedi despite his best efforts at stealth. He saw the dead bodies of the family members butchered on the floor, the mother, father, and siblings of the 5-year-old girl that was crying in the thug's hands. Pommel put a blaster to her head, using her to keep Plo back while he made his way to his ship. Plo reports that at that moment, he had no doubt the girl would be killed once Pommel escaped. I believe I acted entirely instinctively when I extended my right arm toward Pommel and released a barrage of lightning. He added that he knew of Force lightning from the general study all received in the temple, but did no specialized training or have any interest in it. But once unleashed, he did feel he had an innate ability in this power. When he sent out those yellow bolts of electricity, he felt no fear or anger. The first bolt shot Pommel's hands out to his sides, releasing the blaster and the girl, and Plo hit him with another charge to make him go unconscious, but claimed to feel no urge to snuff out the man's life with a third bolt. The council wanted to consider this event before admitting him to the seat on the council that his late master had recommended him for, and after long meditation, he claimed he still felt he was able to keep his mind from wandering over into the dark side. He had no interest to learn of Force lightning, but did think that if he had this unique ability, he should train his electric judgment. Even going on the offensive, and saying the only person who should judge whether or not it was a good or evil ability was the 5-year-old girl, giving the council the girl's new address if they wanted to stop meditating and go speak to her personally. The council would believe Plo, and eventually allow him to develop this ability further, but did require that it be kept a secret from all in the Jedi Order, even to the later members of the council. Only those active at the time of this event knew of it, while it was also recorded on the Great Holocron. This was an intelligent device that would restrict information to only those who were able to process it, those at the right time and with enough skill. That was the level of precaution against an ability that wasn't even of the dark side. It was just close enough to be troubling, and at a time before they even believed the Sith were still in the galaxy. So hearing that a powerful master like Voss was actively training with Sith Lord Dooku at the bloodiest peak of the war, this was simply an unacceptable risk. Only Kenobi held out that they need to give him one more chance, without revealing that they knew he was a double agent, and to just orchestrate one more opportunity to assassinate Dooku. During this mission, Voss was forced to show that he had fallen. As Kenobi's strike team closed in on the Count, he helped his Sith master kill Jedi Knights Desh and Bayans. But when Ventress succumbed to the Sith lightning, the final looks from his tortured lover helped bring him back to the light. dropping his saber and giving up the fight, letting Kenobi and Skywalker take him in. This turn at the end of the fight weighed heavy on the Council, knowing how dangerous it would be if he was lying again. Seeing how the darkness had corrupted and destroyed their brother helped them see how close they had come to giving up on their values, and they swore not to execute him, but did make Quinlan stay alongside Yoda, essentially being reduced to a humble Padawan. Voss was scared of himself, perhaps even more than those around him, and was tormented every day by his temporary fall. Plo and the others eventually trusted him enough to let Kenobi act as his chaperone, and even travel off-world to Dathomir to visit Ventress's grave. Ahsoka was gone, the Sith assassin was dead, and they watched as one of their own fell into the dark side during a risky and ethically questionable mission that they, the High Council, had planned. Days later, they would finally see the death of Count Dooku as Skywalker severed the traitor's head over Coruscant. Plo was securing Cato Neimoidia in what all were hoping could be the final fight of the Clone Wars. With the 442nd Siege Battalion, he was able to keep the purse world of the Neimoidians firmly in Republic hands, a major financial blow to the Separatists that would surely force a surrender even if Grievous was never captured or killed. For now, he would have to sit in via holo to hear the troubling overstep by the Supreme Chancellor, who demanded that Anakin be placed on the Council as Palpatine's personal representative. Though they felt they had no choice, it was unprecedented and against their ancient practice. But it would help quiet the concerns that the Jedi were corrupt and becoming a dictatorship, leading the war without true representation from the public.
How can you be on the Council and not be a master?
Take a seat, young Skywalker.
Plo had been there when Skywalker was just a young boy, pressing the Order to make the most difficult decision of their era, and these outbursts were not taken lightly. The young man did obey Master Windu, and they moved on to assign Kenobi to track down Grievous on Utapau. The next few days would be spent on Cato Neimoidia, and he likely got word that Grievous had been killed. Rumors must have spread that now they would have peace. Calm day, he would be carrying out a routine patrol. In his beloved ship, the Blade of Doran, that old gift from an eager young Skywalker, at the time unaware that his friend had fallen to the true Sith Lord behind this war. His unshielded Delta 7 started taking hits from the powerful cannons on a pair of ARC-170s. In just a few seconds, the Master was consumed in an explosion as he collided with the hanging city. All those narrow escapes over the course of his life as a Jedi, the threats from beasts, the battle droids, and Sith Lords, his ultimate fall came at a moment that he would least suspect. From his friend, CT-5511, Jag. In this bodily form, there wouldn't have been much time to piece it all together. The concerns with the Chancellor, the issue of the hidden Sith Master to Dooku, the unbelievable claims of Fives, and the secret army being built for them all those years ago. But perhaps he could have seen it all from the Force point of view, if only just for a moment, before dissolving into that great source of all life in the galaxy, becoming one with the Force. His memory would live on in countless beings across the galaxy. Those sparks of the Force spread throughout the stars, glowing through lowly matter and their dark and base surroundings, like that beauty found in a wild beast or fine art in a dictator's palace. Plo had always found a way to focus on the light breaking through the darkness, on the people that he had met, laughing in the face of death countless times, seeing the war as secondary and consequential to the true mission of connecting with and loving those around him. In the few moments Darth Vader would think about the life of Anakin, he would avoid the memory of the Kel Dor sage. Shah Kun would be killed by the Fallen One's cyborg hand, his own niece being killed by that little boy that he had once voted to exclude from the Jedi Order. But surely, from this Force point of view, he could see with greater wisdom, as he knew that he did love Anakin. He had supported Obi-Wan once he vowed to honor Qui-Gon's dying wishes, and knew that nobody, not even Anakin, was ever truly lost. Meanwhile, little Ahsoka, now a grown woman, fleeing Inquisitors in a galaxy consumed by the dark side, was making Plo proud, putting individuals first, saving humble families on obscure worlds, seeing them as no less important than the high-value VIPs from the times of the Clone Wars. She would outlive Darth Sidious and his empire, never giving up on those in need, soaring the galaxy in that old T6 Clone Wars era shuttle, perhaps even the same one she and Plo had used together during their shared time on this mortal plane of the living Force. That's it for the complete life of Plo Koon. If you made it this far, please hit that like button, leave a comment, and share the video. These are the best ways to help me out. Subscribe so you don't miss other series like this. I want to cover everything eventually. But most important of all, remember, You can laugh in the face of death when you know that no one is ever truly gone, and the Force will be with you, always.